Well, I can't give you everything you want, but I could give you what you thought you
Hey, how's it going? My name is Jack Johnson. As a Goodwill Ambassador for the UN Environment, I was really excited to hear that the Volvo Ocean Race, 11th Hour Racing, and the UN Clean Seas campaign were teaming up to promote sustainability around the world. I always grew up with this understanding of how we ended up in Hawaii was that when my dad was about 20 years old, he got on a 25-foot sailboat and he sailed from California to Hawaii. So the ocean has always been this really big thing in our life. We grew up surfing, we grew up sailing with my dad, we grew up always just in the ocean, everything was out there. And now when you go to the east shore of Oahu, it's predominantly plastic. At some point I realized that I couldn't just keep stepping over it and go enjoy myself in the ocean. As a dad, as somebody who's gotten so much out of the ocean my whole life, and to be in a position where I can do anything about it, you get to a place where you have to do something about it, and so it's something we've become really, really concerned with and passionate about, especially with the industry that I'm a part of touring around and putting on shows around the world. The last tour we did, we had a lot of the shows where there wasn't one piece of single-use plastic at the venue. Hopefully have less and less of these kind of things on our beaches.
This could make us into anything.
Please join UN Environment, 11th Hour Racing, and the Volvo Ocean Race, along with individuals around the world to create a healthier ocean and take the Clean Seas Pledge.
Highness, Ambassador, Minister, CEOs and Presidents, and distinguished guests, good morning and warmly welcome to Volvo Ocean Summit in Gothenburg 2018. We are all here to together turn the tide on plastics, and we've all joined this race against plastic pollution together in different ways. Some of us are sailing, some of us are talking, but we're all in this together, and we're pretty committed, I know, to take some serious action in this issue. That's why we are here. And Volvo Ocean Race is actually a unique opportunity to bring together people from the sports, of course, from government, from civil society, NGOs, from business, private sector, and from science, and from the court. And I'm very happy to tell you that Her Royal Highness is not just a Royal Highness, which is not just, but anyway, she's also the Royal Patron for WaterAid Sweden, and she's also an advocate assigned by the UN Secretary General to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, with special focus on Goal 6 and 14. And in this room, I know that you know that the goal 6 is to ensure availability of water and sanitation, and the goal 14 is about sustainable development of the use of the oceans, seas, and marine resources. So we're very happy to have you here, Her Royal Highness. My name is Mia Odabas. I have experience from business journalism, both in print and television, and I've been moderating for very long time. I'm going to guide you through this very interesting morning session. You will meet a lot of interesting speakers engaging in deep conversation in this issue. And we are already live streaming this event, and let me welcome you also here. Let me find the camera. It's kind of sunny over there. I think you're over there. Good morning and warmly welcome to all of you following us through the web. Please join into the discussion, and you can use Twitter. The hashtag is Ocean Summit. That goes for all of you in the room as well. So hashtag Ocean Summit. Join in the discussions. I know I have Gustav Rydelius here. Good morning, Gustav. He's here to help me with the Twitter flow. So he takes care of all your questions, comments, and reflections. So do join in the discussion. We will bring some of it with us here up on the stage. Now, if you want to join in the discussion by a traditional microphone, 19th century tech, but we do have that available as well. So you can just raise your hand and we'll get you a microphone. Now, I know we have two hosts here. They are very eager to welcome you. So give a big round of applause to the president of AB Volvo and CEO of Volvo Group, Mr. Martin Lundstedt, and the president and CEO of Volvo Car Group, Mr. Håkan Samuelsson.
Vi går upp ihop, va? Your Royal Highness, Crown Princess Victoria, it's such a great honor to have you here. Minister Carolina Skog also, and ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. Big pleasure to have you here for the Ocean Summit, for Volvo Ocean Race, and for coming to our hometown, Gothenburg, the hometown of Volvo. We are the joint owners of Volvo Ocean Race, and we are very proud that this edition, among others, but in particular this edition, has been on a specific focus on sustainability and on plastic pollution in the marine environment, obviously. And 3 years ago in Newport, the first Ocean Summit was held around this subject, and since then, and during this race, it has been a series of ocean summits with very good results, and I think also very good knowledge about what is happening and how we can change, so to speak, turn the tide on plastics. Having said that, as Volvo Group and also Volvo Cars, we are extremely committed to sustainability, obviously, and in our daily life with transportation and infrastructural development, we are taking a big responsibility to work with this, because we know that transportation, logistics will continue to increase big time in the world, but it must be considerably more sustainable. And we will have the chance, me and Håkan, to come back a little bit later today and discuss how we are influencing our part of the problem, but even more importantly, part of the solutions. So having said that, we are also pleased that the Volvo Ocean Race are supporting United Nations Environment's Clean Seas, and that we are so many here today. I think this might be a record for this race editions of Ocean Summits. So without further ado, Håkan, great to all have you here, and I leave the word to you, Håkan.
Thank you, Martin, and a big welcome also from me then. We are, of course, extremely glad that we can use this ocean race for this type of events and really focus on something which we believe is really important for our brand, because it has always been there. I think we were one of the first addressing the environmental problem already in 1972. It was said that we are part of the problem. That's why it's important we are also part of the solution, I think. Very well said. And we have been working with that. We are committed to electrify our cars to bring down the CO2 levels. And we have said that around 2025 we should have half of our cars should be electric. And today we are very glad also to make another commitment in this area, that also we need to be much more circular in our design of the cars and stop using virgin materials. So today we have a car outside here demonstrating a commitment. We are doing that by 2025, 25% of the plastic used in a car should come from recycled material. And I think that is another step forwards in really demonstrating that, okay, we are part of the problem, therefore we also need to be part of the solution. So with that, very much welcome, and of course we're extremely proud that our Crown Princess is here also helping us to focus on this very important, so a special welcome to you. Thank you, and enjoying the day.
Enjoy the day.
Thank you very much, Martin and Håkan. As Martin said, they will be back later on to tell you more about how they are now becoming a part of the solution more than the problem. Now, before introducing a film to you, I would like to say that right after the film, you will meet the president of Volvo Ocean Race, Mr. Richard Brisius. But first, you're going to be shown a film on Volvo Ocean Race.
The Volvo Ocean Race is the world's longest and most competitive test of a team in professional sport. The ocean is our racetrack. That's why we and our race partners have a unique opportunity and clear responsibility to fight the urgent issue of plastic pollution. The Volvo Ocean Race Sustainability Programme helps us maximise our impact and spread the message about plastics and ocean health around the world. Thousands of children have experienced our education program, and it's been downloaded in a wide range of countries across the world, from Ghana to Great Britain. Meanwhile, our science program has already provided groundbreaking data on microplastic pollution from some of the remotest oceans on Earth. Our scientists have even detected particles in Antarctic waters. We're also working to minimise the footprint of the race itself and leave a positive legacy for a cleaner future. The Ocean Summits bring together people with the power to create long-term solutions to the plastic crisis. During stopovers, countries such as Spain and New Zealand have joined the UN Clean Seas campaign, and we've heard inspiring stories and innovative concepts to help solve the plastic crisis. We've also avoided the use of several 100,000 plastic bottles during our race stopovers that are visited by over 3 million people in total. So join our mission to prevent plastic pollution and leave a positive legacy for the future health of our oceans. Together, we can make a difference.
Good morning. Just wonderful to be here and see the beautiful water outside in Götaälv. And Your Highness, Minister, ambassadors, friends of the ocean, it's just great to see you all here. And yesterday I was out at sea and heading out towards Vinga, and I looked out towards the ocean and the horizon, which I've seen many times as I grew up here, and I have that draw to the ocean. I don't know what it is, but I felt gratefulness for having this opportunity that I have to work with the ocean, and today I'm very grateful to be here with you, because I know you care for the ocean and you care for a lot of important matters. And I remember 3 years ago we had the honor of working with a team with an all-female crew, and you'll meet Dika Fari later on, who was part of that. And Your Highness was godmother for the team. And I remember so well, Your Highness told the crew that your diversity is your biggest asset. And I think the same applies in a different way to you, because your diverse background here today, you have a lot of expertise, and you come from civil society, you come from business, and you come from various backgrounds, and you have all the means to actually drive and create change together. So I hope today you will have the opportunity to think and come up with smart solutions and take real and concrete action to turn the tide on plastic and beyond that. And what we've seen around the world as we have the ocean summits is that they are working superbly as a catalyst for commitments. And we see that time again, so I hope you also will take commitments today and beyond to tackle this issue. The Volvo Ocean Race has, since 1973, sailed around the world, and it's the true test of a team. And it's a group of people that race around the world together, and it's for real. It's as far from fake news as you can get, and you just shake the hands of Dika Fari and the other sailors, and you will feel that for yourself. And again, just honored to be here with you today, and very, very welcome.
Thank you very much, Richard. Now you will meet the Sustainability Program Leader of the Volvo Ocean Race, Ms. Ann-Cecile Turner. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning. The ocean is our playground, and our playground is threatened. It's threatened by new, sometimes totally invisible danger. And as our sailors have witnessed it, we need to take action. So we started this journey with a belief. And I can tell you it was a big mountain to climb. It was a big ocean to cross, a platform for positive change on ocean health. But this is not only a responsibility, it's a huge opportunity. And I think we are all in this together. So ocean health is our umbrella theme, and plastic is our core focus. But not in a doom and gloom style, more in a positive, innovative way. So finding solutions together to solve this crisis. So we started that journey with 3 pillars of action: impact, footprint, and legacy. To maximize the impact of the race, we have started to create a partnership with UN Environment and their Clean Seas campaign to actually talk to the general public and make things change for the better. So this is the result of the campaign we started so far. More than 20,000 pledges have been signed by the general public. I think it's roughly about 20% of the total number of pledges, which is a significant result. But not only that, we've also had cities, had US state. We also have countries signing the pledge thanks to the Ocean Summit, who, as Richard said, are a very powerful platform for commitments. So these Ocean Summits is the second pillar of that impact, is how to gather influencers, decision makers. You see here the signing the state of Rhode Island in Newport. And to actually influence positive change. We have 7 Ocean Summits altogether, gathering influencers, because we didn't want to organize another Ocean Summit, because there are many Ocean Summits at the moment to talk. We really wanted to push for action, innovation, illustrate best practice. And I hope you're going to leave this room inspired to do the same. The education program of the race, of course, as a mother of 2 kids, we can't leave them without the means to act, because these are the ones who are going to actually make things change. So we've created an education program that is now translated in 7 languages, that have been recently recognized by Prince Charles. And thanks to Lucy Hunt, who's here, who's done an amazing job to actually gather that program together. We've reached more than 70,000 kids online, so it's available online for free. And it's really making things change, also in the workshop in the Race Village. And we can't only talk. We have to walk the talk as well. So, and this is a huge challenge that Megan Jones, our sustainability program leader, has taken on. And she's done also an amazing job, because we wanted to, of course, become a more sustainable event across all the criteria. And we have the best ISO 2012 one in the picture, criteria to organize sustainable events. But we also have a focus on single-use plastic. And believe me, it's a challenge. So we started with a partnership with Blue Water to reduce our plastic bottles footprint. We also then replaced, as much as we could, single-use with this is a sustainable reusable hub in Hong Kong, or compostable serviceware, for example. These are only solutions. And what we can't refuse or replace, we need to recover. And we have Stena Recycling here helping us with nice designer bins to help drive innovation on waste management. And we've achieved amazing results. These are only the few examples that we've achieved. More than 300,000 plastic bottles have been avoided thanks to that initiative. So that's really an outstanding achievement so far. And to finish, we can't be an event that comes in and out. We really wanted to leave a positive legacy. And it's illustrated in several areas. Knowledge transfer. We've built that knowledge, how to organize a single-use plastic event. And we've requested and received so many requests so far. So this is a guide that Megan Jones has put together, single-use plastic, free, to how to organize a sport event without the use of plastic. We also have created a movement, engaging stakeholders. And here you see in Volvo Group an employee engagement platform at the start of the race that is engaging all the employees around the world in that journey as well. We also have seen Volvo Cars organizing successful big cleanups all around the world. We've seen Musto creating a sustainable packaging policy across the whole products. So this has been an amazing journey to see all the stakeholders take on that journey as well. But we also created a scientific consortium with the best in class, because the boats are going in the most remote part of the area that is absolutely unknown at the moment. And we thought, why don't we use the boats to collect scientific data to improve the knowledge of this vast ocean? So we've created that program on the 3 levels to gather lots of scientific data. And one specifically, of course, of interest of us is the microplastic concentration. And we came up with that map of microplastic concentration, where we can see here that there are only 2 spots over the 53 that we've taken where there is no plastic. So when we started that journey with the help of Volvo Cars, sometimes I was a bit afraid to think maybe we are not going to find anything and all that investment, all those efforts. will show us that there is not a problem. But in fact, there is, and that's why we have to take action. And this has allowed us to create new stories for the race as well. So the media impact of the sustainability stories is quite unheard of. Lots of national TV news coverage about the story of plastic pollution. So this is a really good proof that that platform is actually working to influence positive change. But of course, none of that would be possible without the partners. And I have to thank them all, because this is showing collaboration in action. This is showing what we need to create together to make things change for the better. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anne-Cécile. Now I'm very happy to introduce the keynote speaker of this morning. He is an ambassador. He's the chair of Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, the government board, and he was the first chairman of WaterAid Sweden. He has also been a deputy Secretary General to the United Nations. He's been serving as a Swedish Minister for Foreign Affairs, and he is an experienced mediator in several different conflicts around the world. A big round of applause for Ambassador Jan Eliasson.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mia. You forgot that I'm a Gothenburger. Roots and wings. You got to have roots in life, and you got to have wings in combination. Your Royal Highness, Minister Skog, Excellencies, friends of healthy oceans, and friends of a sustainable world and a sustainable future. It's great to be here, close to the water, and see how this fantastic initiative of the Volvo Oceans Race also turns into a message to the world about us finally starting to think about how we can achieve peace with nature. We have for far too long treated the world as it is something we can waste and consume, but now I think we are growingly realizing that we have to have a sense of responsibility for this world. And that this responsibility isn't limited to international organizations like UN or governments, but also is something for all of us. The business world is very quickly moving in that direction. Science is focusing on the scientific needs that are related to environment. Civil society was mentioned as another actor. And I say nobody can do everything, but everybody can do something. And I think it's important that we mobilize all these good forces now in a world of so much uncertainty that we see around us. And that we set a direction that we can be proud of. And this builds on the premise that we work together. The word was mentioned in the last speaker. I think the most important word in the world today is together. We can only achieve things if we combine forces and work together. I would say in competition with the word together as being the most important word, I would say responsibility. Ansvarstagande is another one. And sustainability, of course, a third one. And here I would just say a few words about this negotiation that I was conducting for 4.5 years to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, the Agenda 2030. I have this little thing here. I have one more in my coat pocket, which I will donate to the one who is first approaching me. But it was a fantastic negotiation. I said to the member states when we started the negotiation, be careful, don't let this be a negotiation that ends up with the lowest common denominator. And they listened almost too carefully, because, Karina, I would say this is the most ambitious roadmap that we have for a better world that we have had in the whole history of civilization, because it builds on the premise that there is no peace without development, but there is no development without peace, and there is none of the above without respect of human rights and the rule of law and well-functioning institutions. That model is now translated to 17 goals. They are universal, they are applicable to all, not only poor nations. I would say in terms of sustainability, it's probably more relevant to the rich countries. And they are mutually reinforcing. So as the Crown Princess knows on water, if you do water right, then you it turns into less of child mortality, better of maternal health, better for education, better for gender equality. So everything is interrelated. But what is also very, very good with these goals is that they mobilize all sectors. I would say one curse that hangs over organizations, maybe even in the industrial sector, the business sector, is that we work far too much in silos, in sectors. And I think the secret to success for the future will be that we should put the problem in the center. And a glass of water certainly could be such a problem. And then we ask the question, who can do something about it? And then gather the different actors. And in this case, the business world, civil society, international organizations, governments, and all of us. And then we can get things done. So I would say the goal number 14, which is about oceans, is a very, very good goal to start with, but it will have an effect on so many other sectors. And the goal in itself covers, of course, as we already know, not only the plastics threat, which is horrible, but also what happens to the reefs in the world, and of course the basic issue related to climate change, namely rising sea levels. And if we don't act in a very engaged and productive way, we will see millions of people moving in particularly the poor parts of the world to areas which are less close to the sea, with enormous political and economic and social consequences. So this work that on the surface would look like we are fighting the plastics battle is actually one of the most important steps we can take in today's world to have peace with nature. My daughter Emily advised me when I came back from the negotiations on Iran and Iraq, and I had met Saddam Hussein, who isn't known for his human rights commitment, and the mullahs in Iran. She said, stop working with these nasty people, you should work with nature, peace with nature. So I'm really engaged in this and think it's wonderful that you here in Gothenburg is taking this on. And this is something that we should show others also. We should be examples. My driver in the car from Landvetter called his headmaster in the schools and said that the kids should start collect the plastics and all the trash in nature and at lakes. And I used as an example, and I asked for permission from the Crown Prince to say this. We meet every now and then, the Crown Princess and I, and I had asked what you and Estelle had done the earlier weekend, and you showed me a picture on your cell phone, your iPhone. And that was Crown Princess Victoria and Estelle gathering trash and plastics in a plastic bag in the Hagaparken. So let's give her applause for that. That's what I call a role model. I usually mention your background in Water Aid and the UN, but now this, I think, was a more appropriate example. So all this only to tell you that something can be done about this, and we have to do it. But on the other hand, I don't want us to do it in the sense of hopelessness. There is a lot of hope in the world, and there is a lot of chances to change realities. And we must keep a certain optimism, although I, for one, have now decided that I am an optimist, but I'm a slightly worried optimist. So we better come together and get on to work, and then I will invite Mia. I cut down my speech to half in order to have Mia come up and have a conversation for 5-10 minutes. Wasn't that what you planned?
Thank you very much.
Good.
We give him a round of applause before we start the conversation. Thank you, Jan. Jan, this water issue is really an interesting one because water is actually also a factor for peace. Water could be something to unite on, cooperation, or it could actually be something that you have conflicts on. Would you say that we today have models for sharing, or will it be the other way, a lot of rivalry, struggle to get the water?
Well, I have seen some pretty nasty examples of water being a reason for conflict. When I was mediating in the conflict in Darfur in Sudan, I saw horrible examples of the militia placing dead dogs or sheep in the wells, in the water wells, in order to chase the population away from that village into the huge camps. But of course, I said to myself, what joy, what use did they have of these villages when they had destroyed the water? So it was very destructive. I also saw more and more of border problems. There is now a dispute between Egypt and Ethiopia on the Nile, how that will be regulated, Uzbekistan and Tajikistan. I've seen in the West Bank in Israel, between Israel and Palestine, how the settlers in the Israeli settlements have 4.5 times more fresh water than the Palestinians, who have their olive trees to think about. And so, no, I think the examples, unfortunately, are pretty negative, and I think we have a huge challenge. And I ask you to, particularly those who work with in universities, to look into how we can make water and a scarce resource a factor, a reason for cooperation. If we would share instead of stealing from each other, and not exercise rivalry about resources, but see how we can manage them and consume in a responsible way and share, and that would be also a factor of peace. So I introduced a term which I'm very proud of, hydro-diplomacy, water diplomacy. We should use water as a reason for bringing people together and get peace rather than fighting about it.
So hydro diplomacy, it's a good one, water diplomacy. So we do have, you told us about a lot of good examples, but it's bad examples actually. But we need models for sharing, we need hydro diplomacy. How come that this issue ended up very high on the UN agenda? Why was that?
Well, water was already a goal in the Millennium Development Goals, the goals that preceded the Sustainable Development Goals. Then it was mostly water, sanitation, and hygiene. We called it WASH, the WASH sector. And it turns out that the figures were at that time scary. It was almost 1 billion people without fresh water. And there was also there's still over 2 billion people who don't have sanitation, toilets, that is. And there's a lot of education needed in the hygiene sector. So that was huge work, and we have had some improvement. Today the figures are down to 660 million people without fresh water, this fantastic luxury of taking water almost in the restroom as we can in our country is a complete dream, a luxury for millions and millions of people. But now, then growingly, we saw how in today's world we will see scarcity in a number of sectors. And if scarcity turns into conflicts, then we are in real trouble. And another huge challenge is, of course, if the water in the oceans start to rise and people move in those enormous numbers that we could see in some years, then we have a huge, very dangerous future. I was in the Mekong Delta in Vietnam only 2 years ago, and believe it or not, the Mekong Delta that I thought was a green, wonderful area was now really in trouble. The water has gone down because of dam building around the Mekong Delta and the rise of the sea level. And already people are moving away from the farms already now. So it's happening now. So I think we need to see the relationship between nature, resources, and our civilization, and our peace, and our prosperity. And that's why we have to move pretty fast. Even if I don't want to be pessimistic, I think we should be determined and not wait for too long. And with young people, we will have to bring in young people. We have to change attitudes, I think, to bring in young people. We shouldn't only, we in my generation and maybe even some younger ones, think about what we should do for young people. We should work with young people. They are into it. I was in the schools of Stockholm now with my grandchildren, and they ask all the fundamental questions about environment, climate, peace and war, and we should try to mobilize as much as we can to make sure that they have a better future.
So you say we're in a hurry, we need hydro diplomacy. Do we also need some kind of Paris agreement for the water and the oceans?
Oh yes, I should have mentioned, of course, Paris Agreement, because 2015 was one of the most depressing years in the political area. We had the continuing Syria war. I was desperate about trying to get together a solution together with the best negotiators in the world, but the Security Council was tied up. We had the beginning of the Yemen war, but then we had the good news. 2015 was three fantastic good news. The agreement on nuclear energy with Iran. Unfortunately, the US is now leaving it,
anymore, yeah.
but I think it has to be respected. The other two news was the Sustainable Development Goals. 25th of September in New York, the Pope came to when the decision was gavelled, and I think I went to sleep in the evening with a smile on my face. But then in December came the Paris Agreement, and the Paris Agreement is actually or I would say the SDGs is a roadmap to achieve the goals set down in the Paris Agreement. I think we should aim for 1.5 degrees, not 2. And I think these two agreements, the SDGs, Agenda 2030, and the Paris Agreement, are two fantastic tools in our hand which we must use. And I ask you to spread the news about them. I challenge my grandchildren to know all 17. My 5-year-old knows the 17, believe it or not. And if we can use that roadmap and do it together, that most important word, we can really make it.
You said you had another one in your pocket of this one. Can I have it?
I said the first one who approached me.
Yes.
There it is.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm proud of this. So, the Paris Agreement, yes. Is there a need for a Paris Agreement specifically on water, do you think?
Well, there are several conventions on water, but I think the work that Volvo, this initiative is conducting, and the figures were impressive that we just learned about. I think that we also need to have some type of regulation about the use of plastics. And then I also hope the scientific world and the business community works in such a way that even products that are a bit in the danger zones for their effect on nature, they need to be revolved. There was a phrase here about reusing, and there was a line that I picked up that if you can't reuse it, refuse it. If you can't reuse it, refuse it. Whether you go to the store and buy goods and not bring your own bag or whatever. The main thing is that we realize that we can't do something on our own. We can't just point to someone else to do it. We have to start from our own, and there's always something we can do. But I think we need, on all levels, not only on the international level, but also national and global and local. I think in today's world, international and national come together. The good international agreements, like on climate or migration, the good international agreement is actually in the national interest of member states. It takes long for bigger nations like US and China and Russia to come to that conclusion, but I think for us in Sweden, we should really realize that the international solutions are national interest. On the other hand, we should know that building a good nation with, justice and respect for nature, respect for human rights, seeing each other as in totality in an inclusive way, is also, building such a society is not only good for our people in our countries, but also for international peace and security. So national, international come together. That's why it's so great to come back to Sweden after UN.
And Gothenburg.
And Gothenburg, home.
Jan, you said you were a worried optimist.
Yeah.
So finally, could you just tell us, when do you think we have solved this issue?
Which issue?
The water issue.
Well, we are in the beginning of turning the tide on fresh water. I think we are moving pretty quickly from 1 billion people without water to 660. Sanitation is hugely made difficult because of the urbanization. These cities in the south are growing exponentially, and there is very little infrastructure that works in those contexts. And there's nothing like kommunalskatt, municipality tax. So you get there, and the slums are collecting around. It's horrible. We've seen cholera outbreaks in some major cities in Africa. So sanitation is a huge issue. We can't depend on water. You know, Sweden, about 30, 40 years, we flushed the toilet 12 liters every time, fresh water. Now I think it's down to 4 or 5. But still, we can't build even on water in the rest of the world. It has to be a circular system, as you mentioned, Håkan. So on water as a reason for conflict, I think we are making great progress. Because we are more or less making member states realize that if they don't do it, they gain nothing from it. For instance, the goats, sheep put in the wells in the village didn't help the militias. They couldn't take over that village. And you've got to make a win-win situation. In fact, generally, I would say that you cannot get any change unless you have a combination of doing the right thing, and we know in our hearts and stomach what is the right thing. But it also has to be built on an enlightened self-interest. You have to build in the reason that this is good for yourself, for your country, for your children, for the future. So when you have a combination of doing the right thing with the enlightened self-interest, that's when it works. And that goes very much for the water issues.
So as for commitments, we're very much into commitments here. I know you've made several commitments, but this one is a good one. You're educating your grandchildren in the SDGs.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, that's a very good commitment.
My 5-year-old Jonathan knows the 17.
That's actually
I don't know it myself completely.
You haven't told your 5-year-old grandson, though, that you don't know them all?
No, I said, yes, that's correct. And then I look at the list.
Oh, you checked it. Jan Eliasson, thank you so much for joining us here today. Thank you. Nobody can do everything, but we can all do something, as Jan Eliasson said. Now, to educate you even more and go into more deeply understanding of the issue, let me introduce Mr. Marcus Eriksson, who's a research director and co-founder of the 5 Jars Institute. A big round of applause for Marcus.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you for this opportunity to share with you the state of the science on plastic marine pollution. I've been involved in this issue for about 18 years, and I still can't get it to work. There we go. So about 18 years ago, I was on Midway Atoll, the mid-Pacific, with 14 high school students. We were there learning bird ecology, and to our dismay, every single skeleton we saw, these albatross, there's a little pile of plastic pouring out. And Midway Atoll, a little small island, makes nothing plastic. It was all coming from somewhere else. And that galvanized my belief that this issue, it's global, and we must do something. That was 18 years ago. So today to sit here in front of you and see this much activity is very heartwarming. But this is the work that we began doing 10 years ago, and there were still some unanswered questions. And the big question was, okay, everyone's talking about this fictitious island of trash, but where is the plastic? How much is out there, and what is the impact? So that began a series of about 20 expeditions. We've gone around the world, dropping that net in the water, dragging it across the ocean surface, counting and weighing and classifying the particles, and trying to understand that distribution. And like I said, it is global, but each time we crossed one of these subtropical gyres, there's a heat map, and the orange and red blotches are where the accumulation should be according to current modeling. So we use our data to populate the model, and we were discovering all around the world the same thing. There were small, broken down microplastic particles. There was no island of trash the media had sensationalized. So we did this, and we published that paper. It was the first global estimate of all plastics, all sizes, and all oceans. But interestingly, the smallest particles of plastic, because we divided our plastic in 4 size categories. The big things as big as beach balls, the smaller bits as big as water bottles, then the things as big as a grain of rice, and then the smallest dust-sized particles, as big as, let's say, a little flake of pepper. We found the smallest particles 100 times less on the ocean surface than expected. And it made us realize, publishing this, that the ocean surface is not the final resting place for plastics. In fact, this big number, 250,000 tons, is less than 1% of 1 year's production of plastics in the world today. It's not staying on the surface. It's fragmenting, and we're finding that many organisms are eating it, and when they excrete it, those fecal pellets sink to the seafloor. So the seafloor is likely the final sink. So we did this, and then we did more research since then. And we're going to places like the Arctic, where there are abundant fibers everywhere. Subsurface, on the surface, frozen in sea ice. We went to the North Atlantic, sailing from the Bahamas to Bermuda, across to New York City. We collected 38 surface samples, and when we got to New York City, that's the bottom corner here, there was more plastic there than all the previous samples combined, showing that it's our cities that are ejecting all this plastic into our marine environment. And the top picture here was the Great Lakes, where we found these little tiny, perfectly round spheres of plastic, little blue and purple and yellow pieces. They were the beads, the microbeads from facial scrubs. We found it, we published the paper, and through an amazing coalition of people, policymakers, industry, artists, sailors, activists, educators, we were able to put a bill in front of President Obama 3 years after publication. And it was the first national bill to ban microbeads, showing the power of collaboration. It was quite amazing. So that 10-year-old idea of fictitious islands of trash, there's a need to change the narrative. And we have been proposing this, called a smog of microplastics. When you think of smog, you think of air pollution. Trillions of particles in the air, each carries its own burden of toxicity and wide distribution. Well, microplastics in the ocean are the same thing in a very general sense. But when you think of smog, you don't think of a lovely island where you can go and plant a flag and buy real estate. You think of pollution, you think of a problem, and you think of prevention. You don't think of going out there and picking up all the small particles. You think of stopping the source. That's why we think this narrative is a better way to frame the research. But our first expedition, my first expedition out in the ocean, was not a research voyage. So 10 years ago, we thought to do a public stunt. So we took an airplane, we put 15,000 plastic bottles under it, took a bunch of broken sailboat masts from marinas and made a square deck, made an A-frame and hung a piece of sail. And with no motor and no chase boat, no support vessel, we were towed off the coast of Los Angeles. And I was thinking we were going to demonstrate what plastic trash from the California coast, where it goes, how the gyre currents move, and get the public paying attention to this issue. I thought it might take us three weeks, maybe 4, 5 if I'm unlucky. 3 months later, we drift into Waikiki, Hawaii, a very long sail. The good news is it still floats. I still have the boat. And we can consider this presentation my official request to join the Volvo Ocean Race next year. If there's a prize for last, dead last, like 5 years to get around the world. But when we got halfway across the ocean, we were out of food, eating a lot of peanut butter and fish, not the best combination. But I caught this fish, and I filleted the fish, opened the stomach, and little plastic bits popped out. This is perhaps the only important photograph from that little expedition on our homemade raft. It's been seen around the world, but it really galvanized for me the fact that there was microplastics everywhere. This was 10 years ago. The distribution was global, and the impact was horrendous on our fisheries. So we've been doing studies on these impacts. We looked at the bite marks on plastics. If you walk your beach anywhere around the world, you might see interactions of animals and plastics from bite marks. And we were able to match in the North Atlantic some triggerfish and sea turtles to different shapes of the bite marks. But it goes beyond that. Over 200 species have been found of fish to ingest plastics, including almost 50 commercial fish, many other arthropods and mollusks and bivalves, and lots of commercial products. So it's going now from the ecological impact to the potential human health impact. I went to this desert in Dubai and Kuwait about 2 years ago. I was in the first Gulf War. You said you met Saddam Hussein. I was in Kuwait. I was one of the Marines on the ground, covered in oil, liberating that country a long time ago. And that's kind of where my environmentalism was galvanized. It's those impacts. I went back 2 years ago on a different mission to understand microplastics in the Gulf of Arabia. And I met a veterinarian in Dubai, and he said, "You want to see plastics? Come with me." So we turned around and went deep into the desert, and on top of these little hills, I could see piles of white bones here and there. He studies camels. We walk down to one. He pulls a rib out of the ground, hands it to me. He grabs another and he says, start digging. So we're digging inside the rib cage of this camel, deep about 60 miles into the desert, and we pull out of this animal a mass of plastic bags about as big as my arms. And he said, about 15 years ago, the first camel came in with plastics in the stomach, and now half the camels come in, and most of them don't survive. And he said, the impacts, it's not just the ocean that you're focused on, it's on land as well. And it became clear to me the entire biosphere globally is impacted or interacting with our trash. Where is it all coming from? Well, we know that since the history of plastics, about 8.3 billion tons of plastics have been made. A lot of it is still stuck in our closets. It's in construction materials, about a quarter of it. Not very much is actually getting recycled, but 600 million tons since the history of plastics on our planet. A lot of it's getting lost. Where is it going? Throughout the ocean environment, in all biomes, we're seeing it in all environments, on the seafloor, the sea surface, the mid-water column, riverbanks, in sediment, in biota, even the atmosphere, we're losing microfibers. So again, the ubiquity of plastics worldwide. Now, this is important. Is there harm? Does it really matter? It's a great study by a colleague, Chelsea Rockman, published in 2015. The blue squares, the darker the blue square, the more published papers on the impact. And it's by the size and the organizational structure, from subatomic to populations. We know a lot about plastics this big affecting individual organisms. What we now know, and just 3 years later, look at the same study again, we're seeing much, much more in that same area, products or particles this big in individual organisms. What we're finding more, though, and what's important, is to understand, are there whole populations getting impacted by all sizes of particles? So there are some data gaps. There are some debates about whether microplastics matter that cause harm or not. I would say the case is not clear. We need more field studies of population impacts. So where's the science now? A few things. We want to understand the sources and solutions of plastics of all sizes. Where's the source? Where's the sink? And how do we solve it? Where's the missing plastic? Where is it? Is it the seafloor? Is it in sediment? Is it in biota? Where is the final resting place? What's the fate of synthetic chemistry? Population level impact and human health. These are the key research questions. That's the frontier for the science now. Now I'm going to go into some general ideas. What I'm seeing, I've just come back from a UN event in Bangkok where we're looking at harmonizing some standards for how we measure plastics. So I want to talk about sort of what I've observed as high-level solutions. We all know about the circular economy. One example I have seen where I think we can really make a difference is looking at remote communities. When we were in the Arctic, I was trawling in front of a community at 72 degrees north, way up there looking for microplastics. And then I look up and you see a little plume of smoke. Their landfill was on fire. And I thought, okay, what's the impact of microplastic research while they're burning plastics? When I got to talk with them, they said it's the linear economy. It's the one-directional flow of packaging and products to remote parts of the world, remote islands, remote communities. There's a need, an economic need to understand, reverse those logistics, get those materials back. Every island I've gone to, and perhaps you've seen it yourself, they deal with trash with a match, or they'll bury it, or they'll push it into a stream. And I've seen that everywhere that I go. That's one good point of intervention that I think we could focus on. Building zero waste communities. I had a chance to walk with this man. He's an ocean voyager from Samoa. He had just arrived in Wellington, New Zealand on a waka, and we walked up to the parliamentary steps to ban plastic bags. It was a march. And what I learned from him is what's happening around the world, and this is one great intervention point, are decentralized waste management. What we've all seen in many big cities is an unregulated dump where trash gets dumped, the little fires here, scavengers, waste pickers picking up trash. That's a centralized system. The decentralized MRF, it's working very well. In Southeast Asia, there are a few organizations that have created more than 1,000 villages that are doing their own waste management, which means they get really good at composting, really good at recycling, and the residuals. They ask themselves, do we need this? Do we need these disposable diapers or sachet packets, little purple chai cups? So this decentralized model, it's scalable, it's economically possible, and it's working. It's already happening around the world. More of these can really help this issue. Aligning and focus. In the last couple of years, we're seeing more research, not on plastic in the gyres, the work that I've been doing. It's more about land-to-sea connections, and we're seeing this happen. These are from Jambeck and Le Breton, great studies for alignment. And I'll mention my last two slides. I just came back from this one event in Bangkok, a working group. We're trying to harmonize methods. So everyone, every city, every NGO is measuring plastic in the same way. You can't mitigate what you can't measure. So right now that's happening with this working group, is to harmonize all those methodologies. It's happening right now. It's pretty exciting. This should be out the end of this year, a good booklet on standard methodologies. And the second is this working group. It's looking at all the ways we're trying to solve issues. What does data show works the best? If you're trying to deal with plastic bags, is it a ban? Is it a better kind of bag? Is it better recycling? What does the data show? So these two working groups, I believe, are a great path forward. And again, having been this issue for 18 years, working with students and pulling plastic products out of bird skeletons 18 years ago and being here today, I can tell you I am full of optimism that we can solve this soon. And it comes from amazing collaborations like this here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marcus. Just a couple of questions before we leave you. Now, you're full of optimism. So what do you think? We have people here from government, from business, from civil society. What is your advice? What should these people do to make this happen that you were describing?
I think one is to get science, real science, not fake science. Get real science and use that for good, smart policy. One example, when I was in Bangkok, walking around some of the neighborhoods and seeing little tiny small rivers full of plastic waste and raw sewage as well, and thinking something has to start. And one start might be the single-use packaging. Well, not might be, should be. I went to one 7-Eleven just 2 days ago, and there were individual bananas wrapped in plastics.
Individual bananas?
In 7-Eleven.
In 7-Eleven, right.
In Bangkok. So yes, I think getting rid of the single-use plastic, these products don't capture the negative externalities, what happens beyond that point of purchase.
But you had some proposition on this issue, single-use plastics, just a couple of weeks ago, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, that's happening. I think around the world, you see there are over 60 countries are passing legislation about plastic bags, and we're seeing more on straws and on foam polystyrene. It's all the single-use packaging. I mean, plastic is great in technologies and safety equipment in hospitals, but the single-use throwaway culture is one place to zero in and end that, especially with the decentralized MRF model. They're taking a good look at single-use plastics because they don't biodegrade and they're not that valuable as recyclables.
So use real science to make good policy. And as individuals, what can we do except not using the straws and single-use plastic things?
The one thing comes to mind I always tell people, first is support everything happening within your community. But for the individual, look at your grocery list, what you buy. On your grocery list, you can easily say, I'm not just buying the product, I'm buying the packaging. And do I need this? Where does it go? Make a conscious purchasing choice. But then the bigger picture is support the global movement that's going to eradicate the problem.
Marcus Eriksson, thank you very much for joining us here.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Now, let's reorganize the stage here a bit and welcome up 3 sailors. They've been sailing around the world, they've been meeting people, they've been talking to people about this issue, and we are now going to hear what they have heard and how they have raised awareness. Welcome up on stage, Adi Kafari, who's skipper at Volvo Ocean Race sustainability boat Turn the Tide on Plastics. Welcome, Dee. Martin Strömberg, he's crew on the same boat, and he's also a Gothenburg stopover ambassador. Welcome. And Charlie Enright, who's skipper at Vestas 11th Hour Racing. Welcome.
Thank you.
Now, guys, you're sailors. You just helped me to take this table to the front. Could you, please?
Yeah.
Good. I know you're a lot better at this than I am. We just place it here, and we can stand here. That's fine. Thank you very much. So, welcome to Gothenburg, all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
How does it feel, Dee, to be in Gothenburg finally?
It's great to be back. I feel
great
like
to be
I've come back. I was here for the boat show last year and obviously here in the last edition of the race as part of Team SCA. And it's lovely to see some familiar faces.
Now, you've actually used the boat as an educational platform to raise awareness around the globe. Tell us, how have you been working with this issue?
Well, we've had 2 races in this event. The race as a sporting event on the water, but also the race for our ocean health, spreading and amplifying the message and getting people to change their behaviour and attitude to single-use plastics with the branding on the boat under the Clean Seas, UN initiative Clean Seas Turn the Tide on Plastic. But something that's just a little bit different on board is we're carrying a science project. So Marcus just spoke about real science. And we're actually, for the first time, gathering raw data all the way around the world, as Anne-Cecile showed on the infographics, testing the water from below the surface as we're making water, and going through the microfilters and getting those microfilters analysed for the microplastic content. So it's actually raw data for the first time in the remote places that the Volvo Ocean Race visits that can't be ignored anymore.
So it's real science being made.
Real science, Marcus.
Real science. Martin, it's your second time around the world, no?
No, it's my second time coming home to Gothenburg with the race. It's my 4th time around the world, so it's
4th time around the world, 2nd time to Gothenburg. Now, what have you met when you've actually been at all these stopovers? What have the people said? What's their reactions to your message?
I think it's been very positive. I think it's been amazing to meet so many people that actually care and feel that we can do something about this. And just here listening to everything today, it's fantastic.
Do they have questions for you when you can't come to the ports?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, what questions?
No, asking what they can do to help and help the problem.
Charlie, I think you won the Gothenburg import race yesterday, right?
We did, yeah.
Yeah, well, a round of applause for that. So now Anne-Cecile was talking about footprints of the race. What would you say is your biggest sustainability legacy for this race?
Well, our biggest legacy is probably our legacy project. We do a partnership with a local NGO at every single stopover we go to, a $10,000 USD grant to individual organizations that resonate with our cause. And where I'm from in the States, we partnered with Save the Bay, a local NGO working with blue carbon and carbon restoration. Or sequestration, excuse me. And here we'll be working with WWF Sweden and their sustainable seafood guide. And then we're going to have a little fish cookout after a trip to the fish market, I think, Tuesday afternoon. You guys are welcome to come, by the way.
Fish cook. Oh,
yeah.
Welcome to join.
Certainly are.
Good.
Certainly are.
Sounds nice. So why do you think that it's important to use the sport as a way of educating people and spreading the message and inspiring change?
Sport itself is an amazing tool. It has a massive following, especially, unfortunately, sometimes when you compare it to the following of science. So, we're very lucky to be able to do what we do, and we feel like it's our civil duty to give back and to help communicate, around these themes that we're so passionate about.
It's a good way of educating. Now, Dee, I met you. You may not know that because you were in South Africa, Cape Town, and you were on video link. I was in Stockholm, actually. That was November. You said then that it's a very good momentum for change right now. You can feel a sense of urgency in this issue.
Definitely, and I think one of the things with the Volvo Ocean Race visiting 12 host cities is it's such a global reach with this sporting event. And to see that actually we're trying to leave a legacy in each port and people are making commitments to the UN pledge or making commitments as a city or a country to make a difference. And when you see that and you hear the news as you travel around from your home countries, everyone's at a different step along the way on change. And, obviously some people are at the beginning of this journey and some people are much further advanced. And we're there helping them progress further. And I think it's been a very positive thing that the race has done, the impact we've had. We're in a room of key decision makers and influencers. And if we can spread the word further, and as a sporting event, we do that, I think it's really nice. And the momentum is really good. I mean, it's just such good timing.
So it's a really good time to do this. Now, Martin, you're the Gothenburg Stopover Ambassador. What does that mean?
Promote the race and the stop here in Gothenburg.
And what do you see here when you come back to it?
To me, I mean, it's fantastic to be here with the race again and see the impact that the race has with how we compared to last time, how we use plastic in the race village, for example, and around the town.
So you really raised awareness during this race. I'm sure you've had a fantastic race as well. Charlie?
It's been an up and down race, certainly.
Up and down?
Yep, for our team, to say the least. But, that's on the competitive side of things. But, one of the other goals that we set out to accomplish at the beginning of this was to be the most sustainable team in the race. And that's something we still feel like we can accomplish. And it's not quantified to date as the race is not concluded. But, we have a lot of work to do once this thing wraps up in July. And that's something that we're certainly proud of and think that we have accomplished over the course of the last 9 months. So.
It's the most sustainable boat in the race.
That is correct.
Dee and Martin, what do you say about that?
Well, congratulations.
Well, then.
Well done.
Competition-wise, Dee, for you, how have you done?
Oh, it's been a tough race. It's been a long time. We've got, luckily I got Martin on board as the man of experience. We've got a very young crew. We've got 10 nationalities on board our boat. We've got 80% of our crew under 30 having never done this race before. So for us to have got them successfully around the world in one piece and not only completed but been competitive in the process, we're very proud of that, very proud of what they've achieved. And I'm very grateful and a little bit tired. It's been a long way around the world.
A little bit tired.
But I think we're quite proud of the message we're spreading as well. So, I mean, the 2 races we have.
So soon you have a couple of weeks of vacation, and then you'll go again.
Well, that's generally the plan, because you think,
that's
I'm really
generally the
tired
plan.
and I need a break. And after you've had a few days of that, you're like, when do we do it again?
Yeah, one of the sailors said the same thing yesterday night on stage, that you need 1 or 2 weeks of vacation and then you want to go again. Now, finally, what would you give to this audience? Just one simple thing of advice, one simple thing, or maybe not so simple, but one thing that we can all do to help pushing this issue. What do you say, Charlie?
It's interesting, and I come back to, we're in the process of calculating our own carbon footprint as a team, and something that we do as professional sailors is we sail around the world a lot, and we found that 55% of our overall team carbon footprint has come from air travel, and there's an online calculator where you can basically find out what your carbon footprint is in association with air travel, and you as an individual have the ability to offset that, and that's something that our team is doing through the Seagrass Grows Foundation, and whether it's planting a tree or whether it's planting mangroves or salt marshes, that's something that we worked with an organization, Save the Bay in Rhode Island, and we're going to continue to do. But I mean, if you can go online and figure it out yourself, you can certainly be part of the solution.
So even sailors have big air trip footprints.
Yeah, certainly. Our short team probably has a bigger one, but unfortunately, given what we've been through in this race, we've spent some time on a plane as well. So that's how it works.
Martin, what would be your advice?
I think it's been said before, I think we need to think about what we consume, and I think really think about how we consume and what we consume and what we do with it in the end. It can't be said enough.
And Dee?
Well, it's all about individually making small changes, and then as a collective group, it has a huge impact. But one thing for me that I've learned with the Ocean Summits and the partners we have is the innovation that's out there, and getting that innovation out to the public so they realize there's other options, like the water stations with Blue Water, or the other things that everyone's doing. When it all comes together, you realize that there is innovation and it's exciting, and we need to make that more accessible and inform more people about it.
So raising awareness, that's what you've been doing.
Awareness and education.
During the race. Dee, Martin, and Charlie, thank you very much for joining us, and good luck at the end of the race. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, let me introduce to you the science panel. Dr. Bethany Carney-Almroth, who is Assistant Professor in Environmental Science at the University of Gothenburg. A big round of applause. Welcome. Dr. Toste Tanua, who's leading the science program during Volvo Ocean Race. Welcome. And Dr. Yvonne Mirpuri, who is medical advisor at Mirpuri Foundation. Welcome. Welcome, all 3 of you. Now, diving into the science issue a bit deeper. Bethany, you've been studying effects of microplastics. We heard Marcus here tell us a little bit about that in the sea. He explained a bit why it's dangerous. We don't know very much of the effects of microplastics yet. Why not?
We're starting to understand a little bit of what can happen in lab studies, but microplastics is not one thing, it's many things. So there's a lot of different kinds of polymers. So you saw on the chart that Marcus put up, there's a really big size range, and something that's a nanometer size will have a very different biological impact than something that's bigger, microplastics or even millimeter-sized plastics. But plastics also are chemicals. And they can contain a lot of additives, a lot of environmental chemicals binding. So they're really complex particles. And we don't really know if we're working with a particle effect or a polymer effect or a chemical effect. So we're trying to tease apart all these questions to find a story of what's going on. And it's a lot of small questions that we're addressing.
But you know that microplastics are dangerous. And I know you give advice to Swedish authorities in this issue. What advice do you give to them?
Well, that's a hard question because we don't really have all the answers. And as was pointed out before, we need to have good science to make good policy decisions. So what I can do is just sort of update on where we are now and what we know now and try to put that into a context, which is not always easy because the context is also complex, but try to really to explain what we know and what we know about chemicals and what we know about particles and sources are really important to talk about. Where are they coming from? And once they're out there, we can't really get them back. So we need to start looking at sources, land to sea sources, and try to prevent them from getting into the environment.
What kind of questions do you get from the authorities? What do they want to know?
Should I stop eating blue mussels? Mm-hmm. Mussels are filter feeders that take up more particles than a fish does, for example.
And should we?
Not for that reason, I would argue. We don't, and we'll hear soon from a doctor, but I don't think that we're at a place right now where we can say that microplastic exposure through seafood is a problem. Because if I can just give a quick example of a study that my group did. So we took water, because we've heard that microplastic is in products, and it's in our drinking water. And we know, so we looked at Swedish drinking water up here at our marine station. We found about 4 microplastics in the tap water. And then we took our ultra pure, ultra clean water that was high filtered water in a clean room and found a microplastic in that. So we were unable to work without contaminating our samples, which in and of itself says a lot. And then we also took a glass of water and put it on the table and stood next to it wearing a fleece sweatshirt. And there we found 15 particles. Mm. So plastics are really ubiquitous in our entire environment, and our exposure pathways are through everyday life, through our indoor and outdoor environments, through everything we eat. So that blue mussel is probably not your biggest problem.
You have a lot of other problems, and more research is needed in this issue. Dr. Toste, what are the most significant observations you've done during the science program?
So we have found a lot of plastics all over. We have only 2 samples out of the 53 that didn't have any plastics. I think that really shows you the scale of the problem. We have plastics, microplastics in the subsurface layer around the world. We found much more plastics close to the coast, around the Mediterranean, South China Sea, and some other places where big ocean currents are bringing plastics from far away. So it shows really where we have very local plastic. From one position to the next can vary a lot. So there are small-scale variations of the plastic distribution. So that, I think, is the most important conclusion. Plastic is everywhere, unfortunately.
It's everywhere, yes.
Yeah.
So it's a big problem. Now, you've organized this science program in a consortium. Can you tell us a little bit how it's organized and how you can actually spread and use this model in other...
So as a scientist, it's fantastic to be working with these partners, Volvo Ocean Race, who let us come on the boats and do these measurements and been very kind in kind support of actually making it happen. Volvo Cars actually been very supportive of purchasing the instrumentation. And we have a science fund from the German Science Ministry to actually carry out the science. And that together with a couple of small companies that developed some new instrumentation. And we're working then with United Nations agencies on different range. So what Marcus was mentioning here just before on how to measure plastics. But some of the science program that we haven't really talked about here is the operational services that we do. We actually providing real-time data that goes into weather forecasting from the race. So the ocean is actually driving a lot of the climate and the weather. Mm. And we really need this data from far away to make a really good weather forecast on short term and on long term. We also measuring carbon dioxide. The ocean is taking up about 1/3 of the anthropogenic emissions of carbon dioxide. So the data from the boats are actually providing some insights on where and how much the ocean is taking up carbon dioxide. And that leads to the next problem. When the carbon dioxide dissolves in seawater, the seawater gets acidified, lower pH, which is bad for organisms, particularly if they make calcium carbonate shells like corals.
So you found quite a few problems.
There are many problems, and we're trying to be in that space where we get the information that you need to manage the ocean, to create a sustainable ocean.
So lots of data that you now are going to analyze and...
So all the data, the carbon dioxide and temperature, it's actually online, and we get it right away. And the plastic data is something that we have to take back to the lab in Kiel. And just after this meeting here, I'm going to go down to the boatyard and pick up the filters that they took on Lake 10, bring them back to Kiel.
Dr. Yvonne, you are a medical doctor, and you're treating hormonal imbalances every day. Do you see a difference? What do you see now that you actually didn't see a couple of years ago?
Good morning, everybody. I've been a doctor for 34 years, and what I see today is very different from what I used to see 10 years ago. Fertility has decreased 50% in the last 50 years. This happens because it's not only about the plastics, but because of all the others endocrine disruptor chemicals that we have in nature, because of microplastics, that contain substances that interfere with the hormonal system. The hormones act in receptors, and the substances that are in plastic and on the other hormonal endocrine disruptors go to the receptor instead of the hormone, and then they can interfere with the synthesis, the transport, the metabolism, the production of the hormone. So illness appear. And for instance, early puberty, how many of you know people, girls getting their periods at 15 and 16? None. Usually we see early puberty at the age of 8 and 9. And menopause that I used to see in the 50s, I see now in the 40s. Something is changing. And also other diseases like autism, mood disorders, thyroid issues. If we take only clinical symptoms for a diagnosis, we can have 85% of population diagnosed with hypothyroidism, with the tiredness, anxiety, depression, fatigue, weight gain. And so, but when you do laboratory tests, you only have less than 8%. So even other diseases like heart disease and diabetes, you used to classify diabetes type 2 as an adult onset disease. And now we can see it at the age of 5. It's incredible what we are seeing today. And cancers like prostate cancer, breast cancer, pancreatic cancer, and also testicular cancer has increased the rate of 400% since 1943 because of environment problems that we can cause in the laboratory animals. So although we can't say that it's because of plastic, and although we can't do experiments on people, we can do all of the illnesses using plastic components and other endocrine disruptors on animal laboratories. So regardless of what you may read in mainstream sources, things are changing and we must act urgently. We are at the 11th hour to do something.
You can see the sense of urgency, a lot of things changing. What can we do to prevent this, to actually fix
I could say we live in the chemical world. They are there and they are useful, and we just need a rational approach to balance between, to achieve a balance between usefulness and risks to our health. I can tell you that food is the major source of chemical in our bodies. So eat unprocessed organic foods. Then you don't know how are they watered. Maybe they don't have pesticides and insecticides, but you don't know about the water they are having. So go to the local market, don't microwave in plastic, never, and buy food in metal and glass containers using reusable metal container for water and other liquids. I could tell you check labels, but then when there are labels, they are diminutes with small print and incomprehensible for most of the average persons. So we need a political regulatory action. We need the governments to be involved. We need laws that require that chemicals should be tested before they go on the market, would be also very important. We need to
Yes.
I have lots of suggestions.
Oh, you have lots of advices. That's good. Let's come back to you. Let's actually, before we come back to you on the advice part, see if you have any questions from the room. Or maybe we should start, Gustav, with Twitter. Is there anything to bring up on the panel?
No, we actually don't have any questions, but a lot of people are quoting all the speakers on stage, and I think the message is not staying in this room. It's actually reaching the world outside this room and the tent and the city. So that's great.
It's good that more than us
sir.
300. Yes, we have a question there. If you turn around, we'll get you a microphone as well.
Good morning, thank you. My name is Keith Freegard. I come from the UK. I recycle motor vehicles, and here there's a car with some of my recycled plastic on it, so that's a pretty good thing. The science is really good, and I thought the words that struck me today was togetherness and responsibility, 2 words earlier from Jan. And generally, I think the people in this room, looking around, look like the type of people who do a really good job at recycling their plastics and other packaging at home, and then it goes off from your curbside and you forget about it. My big concern on the science, and I saw a really good graph earlier of the dots on the trip around the world. It was up for about 5 seconds. I wanted to look at it for 5 minutes. If we're collecting all this stuff in Europe and it disappears out of our normal life, our belief is that it then gets responsibly recycled and turned back into new things. But the evidence I've seen, certainly in the UK, suggests that a massive tonnage of what we collect at our curbside is ending up being exported across the sea. Ocean Conference, really good. We export most of our waste on containers, and that used to go to China. Sorry, this is such a long question. Now China's shut their doors, that's going to all the other countries, Vietnam, Laos, Malaysia, where the standards of waste management are very low. So my question for the panel is, what science do we have that follows the mass balance of the material that we put in our bins, that our governments are responsible for, and yet 65% of it is being exported to those countries in Asia? Where does the waste fraction go from that?
Do we know anything about where the waste ends up, basically, is your question to the science panel?
Yeah,
because this is also a question for, I can say, for the minister, and we'll bring her up later on. But this is a science panel, and you want to know if
Is there any good science about the huge tonnage that flows across our oceans to those countries that gets poorly recycled in low-grade MRFs in those countries, and a massive amount of the waste, which would have to be dealt with responsibly in Europe, must end up in all the rivers that are delivering the waste into the ocean?
So let's see if the panel... Yes, Tosta, do you have any answer to that?
So the question is that we just don't really know. And the data we are collecting during the Volvo Ocean Race is one way towards understanding. And like Marcus was alluding to, from all the plastic that we know ends up in the ocean on an annual basis, we can account for about 1% of that in total. So we really don't know, and we need more science. It seems like a lot of it actually ends up on the seafloor. I've seen videos taken by deep sea submersible from 6,000 meters depth, where you see it looks like a beach in Indonesia, full of plastics, and that's probably what ends up. So we really need that information. It is completely irresponsible to send the plastic to China or other developing countries or underdeveloped countries to take care of it. We need to do that, and I think in Sweden we have actually particularly good system of taking care of this waste, and we are actually importing, or as somebody would like to say, we are exporting a service to other countries that don't have that technology. And I really wish that we could export that technology to many countries. So the answer to the problem is turn off the tap, and we need a responsible waste treatment systems around the world.
So in Sweden, we're importing to recycle, basically.
There is import, so now we are not the China of the world, but we're actually importing, and when it comes to Sweden, it actually gets taken care of in a good way.
Bethany.
I'd like to quickly address another aspect of plastic recycling, because in Sweden we do recycle a lot, and we also do a lot of what's commonly referred to as energy recycling, which means we incinerate the plastics. And that's because the plastics are a very complex group of different materials, and you can't mix polystyrene and polypropylene in a product downstream. And that requires really advanced recycling technologies that can separate the polymers from one another and that's able to reuse these materials. And that is further hindered by the use of chemicals. So chemicals in one product, in one life stage, in a car, for example, where flame retardants are really important and useful, can't be recycled to something that is going to be played with by a child, because then that chemical is potentially dangerous and toxic. And we have to really look at how we're using chemicals and where we're using chemicals. And knowledge about what kinds of chemicals are in the plastic products that we're using is really difficult to come by. So a consumer can't read on a label what kinds of chemicals are in their plastics that they're purchasing in a store. That information is not available. And those decisions can't be made by consumers. They need to be made at a higher level in society with regulation and accountability for production and use.
So, closing this panel, taking in what you're saying about the sense of urgency we should have in this issue, Bethany, what would be your advice?
We need to really look at how we're using plastics and how we're using chemicals in plastics. And I will continue to research microplastics to really try to understand the effects, the mechanisms of the effects, and try to get enough data to extrapolate that to what's happening in the ocean, because we can't do that right now. I can tell you what's happening in the lab, but I can't say what's happening in the ocean. And really to look at the way we're using these materials in society, because the macroplastics are really the sources of microplastics.
And Torsten.
So we really need to understand the problem. So we need to understand what the 99% of the plastic that we don't know where it is, actually where it is. And we have to take in a choice individually to not use plastic if we don't have to. And we have a good opportunity to influence people around us, stakeholders, governments, or your local grocery store to use less plastic, and your neighbor. It starts there. It starts from the, think global, act local. I think that's a good saying that still is valid.
And everybody can do something. Yvonne, you were treating hormonal imbalances. Do you have any special advice for pregnant women?
Yes, because pregnancy is the only time the mother will have to make a good body and a good brain for her baby. And beside all the things that I should have time to say that I didn't, I would give a special advice with the water, because the plastic bottle has lead, antimony, and phthalates, and lead can cause cerebral damage, brain damage for the baby, and it's going to be the brain that the baby will have for the rest of his life. And so mothers should be very careful about the water they drink. They could have a special filter, and even when pregnancy should be thought as a moment very special. And when we are speaking about endocrine disruptors, we can't think about only one, because at every moment we have 200 toxic substances inside of us. So we have a mixed effect. So it's only because it's small dose doesn't matter, it matters, because when the risks go up when we take mixed effects into considerations, and that must be very important. And also because chemicals act, hormones act at a very small doses in the receptors. Also the chemicals in the environment, even in small doses, can cause a detrimental effect on the body. So
no plastic bottled water for pregnant women.
For nobody.
For nobody.
But special for pregnancy. They are recycled, but they shouldn't be reused, because every time the time goes by, they leach more chemicals inside, and it will be more and more dangerous.
So no plastic bottled water for anybody, and it's good we have another solution in the Race Village.
Yes.
Thank you very much, all three of you, for joining us here today. Thank you. Thank you. Now, moving on to the business panel. How can business, as Martin and Håkan said, be a part of the solution and even drive the change? Welcome back to the stage, Martin Lundstedt and Håkan Samuelsson, and welcome also Kristoffer Sundsgård, who's CEO at Stena Recycling.
Hey.
Welcome all three of you. Now, to discuss how business can drive the change. Martin, you said, well, you didn't say very much actually in the beginning about what you're doing. So now is the time. What is Volvo Group doing to reduce your plastic footprint?
First of all, I would like to say that what was encouraging at the start of this day is that we have taken a holistic stance. I think that is very important because otherwise it will get a little bit like when ISO 9000 was new in the world. Then you did your preparations for ISO 9000 for the quality work, and then you put it in a binder, and then you were hoping for the best until the auditor was coming, and then you refreshed it a little bit. But I think what we are doing now is really taking how is it coming, for example, to the sea, but also in other places. And what we have seen is obviously that the biggest impact that the Volvo Group is doing is the usage of our production equipment, excavators, trucks, buses in the customer's operation. 95%, for example, of the carbon footprint. But we have also a very, very big industrial operation, and we need to lead the way. CO2 neutral plants since 10 years. We were the first one in the world. We are continuing to roll out that. But what we are taking now as the next challenge, for example, in our industrial footprint, is that we will have zero waste to landfills. And I was very glad that Marcus talked about that, because now we have 3 of our bigger plants, New River Valley in Virginia, United States, Curitiba in Brazil, and also Braås here in Sweden, that have zero waste to landfills, and we will go for 28 of our 120 factories at least then to 2020 and move on. And you learn a lot. We had a good discussion yesterday, so we were actually working also yesterday, and talking about simple measures that we can do also between partners. So that is one of many, many, many examples.
Simple measures. Do you have any low-hanging fruits that you haven't picked already?
Absolutely. I think we have a lot of I should not say a lot of low-hanging fruits, but by cooperating.
Middle-hanging fruits.
No, exactly. No, but by talking to each other, we learn not internally, but also with different partners. And as I said, for example, with Stena now, we are running a number of initiatives where we can, by small means, also have a pretty big impact on these things when it comes to how we use emballage, for example.
Kristoffer, you will soon be telling about the cooperation here. Håkan, you've today launched kind of a new car. You said 25% of the plastic parts are being recycled, right?
No, they are made from recycled
They're made
material,
from 25% of the plastic in the car.
Which is a much bolder statement. I mean, I think much more can be recycled, but that really doesn't help. So in the future, we need to use less virgin material. It has to be much more circular. And I mean, this is one way of doing it, using recycled material. And of course, another one is creating awareness of using less single plastic. And I mean, that's why I'm very proud today also to sign this Clean Seas Pledge, which is about increasing awareness and reducing the use of plastics. And I mean, that we all can contribute to, but okay, then we concretely try to do it in this car. And I think also it looks quite good. So I think we should not hide these parts. We should be proud of them and label them made from recycled plastic. I think that makes our car more attractive.
So you've actually made these parts of PET, yes. So not to hide what it's made from PET bottles, clothes,
yes,
used airbags, car seats, and even fishing nets.
Yeah, and we need more. I mean, so from the chart here, I mean, a lot just disappear. We don't know where it is, but I think it was a small part was recycled, and I think that we should increase.
Have you tried to drive the car?
No, but I think it's more or less as a normal car.
Okay,
drive,
it works fine. I was just wondering. Now, Kristoffer, first, how do you recycle this newly presented car by Håkan?
right now we recycle a Volvo car by well above 95% recycle rate, and it's pretty much similar with the recycled can of plastics. But I just want to say, I think this is a fantastic announcement of you, Håkan, and the Volvo cars. I think this is actually a little bit of a game changer when it comes to plastic recycling. And I will elaborate a little bit more about that. But before I do that, I would like to just to put it into context in the recycling industry. Because we are a recycling company, we don't just collect the containers and empty the bins and so on. That's, of course, a really important task for us, but we do so much more. And also tied back to you, Martin, we talk very much about the resource management together with our customers, and it's pretty much do the right things from the beginning. So we're talking about design for recycling, design with the correct materials so we actually are able to recycle the product in the future. But it could also be so we can actually look into how can we reduce the waste that occurs in a facility in retail just to measure it and question it. And another thing could be that we sort it correctly from the beginning so we don't mix up materials, because if we mix up materials, then we degrade it and it gets much harder to actually recycle it. So it's quite simple task. For instance, we're doing right now investing in Halmstad 100 million in a plastic foil recycling, plastic foil in logistics emballage. To use transparent color, it makes it much easier for us to actually recycle that. So I think it's quite easy for your guys in your supply chain to just demand that transparent foil. But I also like another thing that's really important for us as a recycler, that a lot of materials that ends up in the society are quite complex when it comes to material content. And then we, as a recycler, actually need to cope with that. We need to deal with that in order to actually recycle that so we can take the products back again in the loop. And here, we as a recycling industry must take a huge responsibility to drive innovation and develop new technologies. And we are a quite large company. We have more than 120,000 customers in all range of industries. And we recycle all kinds of materials, ferrous, plastics, hazardous waste, paper, copper, aluminium, you get it, everything that ends up in industry. And when we have that scale, certain scale, we can actually leverage on that and build economy of scale when it comes to innovation. And we have recently now, for the past 3 years, invested more than 1 billion in Halmstad, in what we believe is a state-of-the-art plant when it's come to recycling technology. And there we, for instance, recycle a Volvo car well above 95%. So going back a little bit to your announcement now, Håkan, we believe that we have so much potential in the material we are actually collecting. But since it has not been any steady demand for these plastics, we haven't dared to drive innovation and build up capacity. But from the other hand, the industry have also said that there's not enough recycled plastic with good qualities and so on, so they haven't dared to source it. So it's a little bit like the chicken and egg situation. But with this announcement right now, I think it's super clear signal to the industry and for us as suppliers. It's a time to take the next step, and we are absolutely ready to rise to this challenge.
So you're actually asking for more demand on recycled
absolutely,
plastics,
to build a market.
And this is a way to giving that, yes. And Håkan, I know you've also worked together with the Volvo Ocean Science program that Tosta was talking about. What have you been doing in that context?
We have... I think one of the most important things we have been doing is creating awareness. And I can just go to myself. I mean, I've heard about the plastic in the ocean, but okay, not very. And then we did sort of clean beach activity when we started in Alicante. I was also in Hong Kong and in Brazil. And it's really an eye-opener. And you really start seeing this and you understand it's a problem. And that's probably step number one, because if we don't even realize it's a problem, we are far away from the solution. I mean, people smoked 50 years ago and didn't know it was dangerous, and then people were aware of that. So I think if more and more people can be aware of that, and that's really, I think, I'm very glad that we, I think, did a small step in that direction, because we have had more than 1,000 of our employees has been part of this out on the beach, and we have been on 50 locations, and I'm sure they talk to at least 10 people about this. So that means we are gradually spreading the message here. This has to be solved, and then we just have to trust our scientists that how we're going to do that. That's the next step. But we're, of course, very glad to support them in this job as well.
So you've been cleaning beaches with your employees. Martin, have you been doing the same thing?
We're cleaning beaches, but I think also what is important is to understand, I mean, a group like Volvo, I mean, we're doing this every day also in our context, and I think that is also important, that We are here now talking about this, but how can we influence, that has also an influence on, for example, the oceans. What makes our lives so fantastic is actually that, I mean, we're into transportation and infrastructure, as I said, and you know that when we live here, people want to go to vacation, they want to have, you know, things that they have bought, and e-commerce and everything is growing. So we have actually the drive for the social foundation in life, which is super important. And people are longing for that in all parts of the world. The middle class is rising, people want to have a better life, urbanization is coming, and then we have the ecological ceiling. And the guys that can maneuver in that, and we are spending out of our 2 billion euros every year, 2 billion euros in research and development on the Volvo Group. We are spending more than 60% on that directly when it comes to, so to speak, the environmental challenges to be truly sustainable. The good news is that 15, 20 years ago, everyone, how much can that cost and blah, 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 blah. And 5, 10 years ago, it was, okay, it might be neutral. And today, everyone knows it's a true competitive advantage. I mean, when we took the decision go electric on buses, fully electric, I mean, we have understood that we are good in hardware, but we must be even better in system thinking. How do we cooperate? How do we get out the message? How do we get the life cycle view on things? How do we get with recycling over the whole life cycle? It's not only about technology, it is about business model, etc. And here I think we have learned a lot. We are moving ahead. We are very proud. That is bringing talent to the group. And we will continue to drive that. Connectivity, automation, or other areas where that is happening. And again, coming back to what I said, the industrial footprint is only 5% of our global footprint, and 95% is with the customers. But you must walk the talk there as well, because our employees love that. If you go to Vara, I mean, Skaraborg is Skaraborg. And if you go to Vara and Västergötland, Crown Princess, I mean, just to talk to our 600 guys in a world-class factory, saying that they are CO2 neutral, for example. Having said that, coming to recycling, etc., I mean, when it comes to excavators, it's 99%, so I think we are also there to some extent.
So you're all talking about collaboration, cooperation throughout the whole value chain. You're a good example of this now. What, Martin, would you say is the biggest challenges with collaboration?
No, but again, I think, you know, the world has a tradition of customer and supplier. And the tradition has been, you know, that you're sitting and playing cards like this, you know, say, okay, you will have the deal if you get a discount of 1 to 2%, etc. Which in this type of context is just bullshit. And also from a financial point of view is bullshit. Because you have seen that when you're starting to work in the flow, as Jan said, not in silos, but working in the flow, you are taking out so much of waste, real waste, in terms of, I mean, overproduction, or wrong type of production, or wrong emballage, or whatever it is, or how do you use the equipment. So you will gain so much more. But the trick is to get over this type of transactional society and get into much more of a cooperative society.
And what does the trick? How do you do it?
No, but the trick is that you need to be much more transparent about, okay, here you have take logistics. We are working a lot, obviously, with transport companies and their customers and customers' customers. And how can we sit together and say, okay, here is this flow. How does that look like today? And through connectivity, for example, we can see that we can take out easily, I'm looking at certain stakeholders here, for example, we can take out easily 25-30% and share that. But still we're into the transaction, but you know, the 25%, I want to keep 20 myself here. And then you not get going. But the guys that can unlock that will win.
So what you do is you go in and you tell your customers that's bullshit thinking.
No. Yeah, if necessary.
If necessary.
Primarily through the suppliers. No, but I think to some extent, yes, by saying, okay, and also taking ourselves as an example. We have been driving, we are not only a transport provider, we are also the biggest transport buyer in Sweden. since we are the biggest company, so we're buying a lot of transports ourselves. And when we are looking into how do we buy, how do we act as a transport buyer, we have seen that maybe we can do a lot of things. So I think the most important is to show through own examples what you can do and be credible.
Håkan, you actually last year announced a commitment to electrify all new cars, Volvo cars launched after 2019. And then just a month ago, you reinforced that, saying you said that in the beginning too, 50% of your global sales by 2025 is going to be fully electric. That's a pretty high goal.
Yeah, and there's really two reasons for that. First is, of course, if you're really going to come down in CO2 levels, that's the way to do it. I mean, otherwise maybe you can save a couple of percent, won't make a big difference. So we need to electrify to come down. I believe also our cars will be more attractive because an electric car is quite an attractive car to drive. But they have to have a certain range, which we are working on. But it also opens up, I think, a very interesting new challenge also, because now we will have not just plastic to recycle, we will have batteries also. Yes. And that's a very concrete project we are now doing together with Stena, looking into, because that is also then could address what Jan said very well. I mean, cooperation is fine, but it has to also be possible to have some kind of interest in it for each side. And I think this is good. So, I mean, if a car then with the batteries has then a rather high value, so I mean, if somebody is specialized really to get that value back into the economy and we can then design the car even more for a circular economy. So this is an example also with the electrification. There will be more challenges on the recycling side.
This is a good example, Christopher, on what you call the design management and do right thing from the beginning, right?
Yeah. And this was Håkan mentioned about the electrified vehicles and so on. When you succeed with this, of course, there need to be much more energy layers within a society, or the power grid. And of course, this might be reuse applications for that. But also after that, we need to recycle that. And we have been recycled cars for 50 years, and we'll be into this business. We'll adapt to the new type of materials that comes up for the new cars.
And you were actually talking about that a little bit in the beginning, but you're also trying to climb the waste hierarchy. You just don't collect, you do every step in between.
The waste hierarchy is like a basis for the legislation, basically, and that's pretty much also what reflects our business model, that you go for landfill, energy recovery, and then you look into what kind of material you actually recycle. And then from that, you can see if you have any reuse applications, and they're pretty much what you do with the electrified the battery, but also from a gearbox from a truck, can you, instead of remelting it, remanufacturing and extend a lifetime for another 10 years. So you always need to see if you can find a higher value when it comes to sustainability and circularity.
So what you're describing, all of you here, is some kind of collaboration through the value chain. You start talking to each other at a very much earlier stage, right, Martin?
Absolutely. No, I mean, and again, talking about innovation and technology development, you need to, I mean, first of all, collaborate and understand also who can do what, who brings value to the table, and how do you drive that together. I think the energy recycling of battery, first of all, is reuse, energy layer, and then it's recycling. But also upstreams, really very tight collaboration, so we see that we are sourcing in a responsible way, and that is also a challenge today, I mean, to find those sources in a good way. And there you need to collaborate also between companies in the country to have a certain size and mass and understanding and competence, and then also, obviously, internationally. So lots of cooperation needed, both between business, but also with politicians and society as a whole.
And we have started that journey. What questions do you have for the business panel? Yes, we have two questions. So let's start with the one who gets the microphone first.
Did I win that?
You did.
Okay, great. Thank you. My name is Axel Wemblad. I'm the chair of WWF, but I was also an environmental director for Volvo 100 years ago or something like that. My question is really to Christopher, because we have been talking a lot about plastic bottles, but most of the plastic waste is other kind of waste. We all know that. And you are a major player on the recycling side, but there are other major players like Volvo and other companies who are using the plastic to package their material, whatever it is. And it's also the manufacturers of plastic plastic for that purpose. How can you do? What can you do more to see to that this circular economy thinking is really, turned into practice? And the second question to you, Christopher, is also what is needed in terms of legislation, what have you, to make this really happen? Because if we don't start that journey, we can take care of the bottles, I'm sure about that, but the rest of the packaging material. If I go to Biltema, I buy a set of screwdrivers, it's wrapped in double plastics, and then I get a plastic bag, not anymore, but before, to take it home. And screwdrivers are usually not very sensitive material. So what can we do, and what can you do as a major player?
Okay, I think it's already mentioned, but I think no one will solve this by themselves. I think this need to be complete cooperation here. And what actually we do as a recycler, we transform information. Actually, we take the residue or the waste from the companies, but we also try to refine that to commodity that we can sell back to the plastics industry. So we need to sit down with the plastics industry in order to understand what qualities are needed there, but also to understand what kind of materials there are in, for instance, that a Volvo truck or a Volvo car. So to pretty much to sit down around the table to be really open and transparent. That's the way forward. And the other thing was regarding the legislation. I think we should start with just cooperate together. One thing that could be advice for the legislator is more to use the public procurement, because they buy quite some recycling services to actually have high demand on recycled plastics within the public entities, but also the recycling services to drive high quality when it comes to recycling.
So no legislation, but use procurement.
Yeah, more like that. Good example.
Would you like to add anything on that? You can solve this issue yourself, Håkan, without legislation.
I think legislation could help if it's formulated in a good way, of course. I think it could be very well both. And I mean, example how we have come further in emission requirements shows that it is constructive and helpful.
So a bit of whip and a bit of carrot in a good mix. We had another question, if we can get a microphone over to this side of the room. We have one here, and then we get the microphone over there. Yes.
Hello, my name is Helena Norin. I'm the chair of the Environment and Climate Committee here in Gothenburg. I have a question about the value of the recycled plastic. As we heard from the earlier session, there's a lot of different chemical additives that is used in plastics, which it was mentioned antimony and it was mentioned phthalates, but there are millions, or not millions, but thousands of different additives. When you recycle the plastic, you don't know what additives are used there, and that may make the value of the recycled material not so high and may be difficult for Volvo to use. How do you manage to get the value of the recycled material higher? And do you see a need of more strict regulation on what information you need to give on the plastics that you are using? Thank you.
Christopher.
Yeah, as I explained at the beginning, what we talk in resource management, for us it's really important from the beginning to try to secure the quality at the source. That's one thing. The value of the plastics also, I mean, the value of the plastics when you're purchasing it is pretty much the same as aluminum or copper. But aluminum and copper, you should never mix that. But with the plastics, you very often dispose that. So it's also very much of a mindset from the beginning. So, and one problem I also mentioned, it's actually, it has not been any steady demand for plastics. So it hasn't been any good, I would say, the market has not functioned good enough. So I think with the Volvo Cars announcement, this is good for Volvo, but they also encourage the whole market to begin to roll right now.
So they drive demand, which you want. Now here, this gentleman wants a microphone. Yes, he has one.
Hello, this is a quick one. I'm Sven-Erik Lindstrand. I'm a freelance for, among other magazines, Motorbranschen, which is heading the National Automotive Dealer Body. Very recently, I saw a press release from Volvo Cars that you are pulling back one-time plastic things in your canteens and cafeterias, etc., in a lot of markets. So the question is, are you going to extend that recommendation or demand for your dealer body? in Sweden and around the world? That was the question. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. Because, I mean, it's part of what we have learned. I mean, going home, then we start looking, and then you came closest you saw was the canteen. So, okay, let's start there. There's a lot of unnecessary plastic. This morning I got a mail from one of our employees. I think that's also a good idea. He's working in the spare parts department. And he said, why are we putting all of these spare parts in plastic bags? Shouldn't we have... I said, very good idea. We have to look into that. So I talked with Maria here this morning. So we will continue doing this. And I mean, it starts with awareness. And at the end, it's people who will make the difference. So I mean, the more people are aware of that, they will have creative, good ideas. And I think that's very positive.
Okay, so gentlemen, a new car made out of recycled plastics that you will recycle even more, electric trucks, zero waste to landfill. I think we've done pretty well in 20 minutes. Martin, Håkan, and Christopher, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, I sincerely hope there are no single-use coffee cups and stuff back there, because now it's time for coffee. We'll see you again at 11 o'clock. Welcome back from the coffee break, and we just can't let go already of business. Business has a huge responsibility for this issue, so we will have another panel on the business people. We will give you some concrete examples of what is being done on how to reduce, reuse, and recycle plastic in the value chain. We've resettled a bit here on stage, so please welcome up the quartet. I'll call them one by one. Günther Lehner, who's CEO and President of Appla Group. Welcome. We'll give him a big round of applause. Welcome, Günther. Have a seat. Fares Sayed, who is Vice President, Global Supply and Go-to-Market Operations at Procter & Gamble. Welcome. And Anders Jakobsson, who's President of Blue Water. Welcome. And Oskar Wesenbeck, who's Director of Marine, Protective and Yacht at Akzo Nobel.
Thank you.
Welcome. So, gentlemen, now we're going to hear a bit about how you work with sustainability and not least the plastic issue. I know, Günther and Fares, that you two are doing a joint project on this issue. Could you tell us what it is you're doing?
The idea came from Procter & Gamble, and they started with the NGOs for the collection of the material, and we then developed the bottle and processed it and tried to make out of this collection, of this mixed plastic collection, we tried to make out bottles, and this we did successfully together, and I think the important one was what Procter did in marketing.
So it's a shampoo bottle, Fares?
Yes.
Yeah, Mia, let me just position it. Plastic for us sits within a broader framework. We look at it from a holistic sustainability program that we've been working on it since several decades, before anybody or many people in the industry never used the word sustainability, so more than 3 to 4 decades ago. So we recently announced our renewed sustainability responsibility for consumption, which what we call Ambition 2030, whereby it sits on 4 pillars. It sits on the brand and the power of the brand and the responsibility the brand can communicate with consumer to inspire and enable better behavior. And the second pillar is about the supply chain footprint. The third pillar is about society, you know, the industry, NGOs, external foundation. And the last one, and a very important one, is our employees. So over the last several years, we've been working on this program. So for instance, today, 86% of our packaging globally is recyclable. By end of this year, we will have more than 25% within our packaging is PCR, what we call post-consumer recycled. We have been working on that for several years because PCR, if you think about within the industry, it needs less energy. It consumes less than, it emits less than 60% of carbon dioxide within the production cycle. But back to the point of Gunther, when we get together, the essence first is when you embark on a transformational thing, it will take three very important vectors, which we went about it when we worked on the Head and Shoulders. The first one is sensitize. If you don't understand and call out the issue, you will never know what you're trying to solve for. So the first thing is to understand what's happening out there, how the world is contaminating, how the ocean is being contaminated. So with the work we do with NGOs, with foundations like Ellen MacArthur, we started by first sensitizing internally our P&G employees and externally our stakeholders that we have an issue at stake. And then the second one is declare the strategic intent that we will work on recycling packaging. When you do that, when you declare that intent, you trigger innovation. You push your people to work on innovation. And then, of course, the third one is the partnership, with companies like TerraCycle, for instance, that went on the beaches of Northern Europe, had more than 1,000 people to collect plastic from the beaches. We had company like Suez who helped us to refine it. And then we have phenomenal partner like Alpa who helped us, create that bottle, which was not easy. And then, of course, you need to put it on the shelf. So in France, within Carrefour retailer, we were able to launch this product. And it's amazing, when you take such a bold decision for an iconic bottle, it's very well known. Head and Shoulders, one of the most sold shampoos in the world, and when you have a white and blue bottle and suddenly you put on the shelf gray, you take the risk that you lose your brand equity. But it's phenomenal what this message set for the industry as a role model that we can make a change even with iconic brand that we believe if we touch them we might lose commercially. It turned out to be completely different.
So it's a success commercially?
Well, we're not driving it from the gray, the commercial success by itself. Head and Shoulders is very successful commercially, but more importantly, brand has a moral obligation to inspire and enable consumer and change their behavior. That is at the core of this change.
Gunther, Fares said it's not an easy thing to do. It's not an easy thing to make this bottle. What was the biggest challenges in the work?
Yeah, the biggest challenge was it was a kindly mixed type of material. We had to adapt our processes to run it, and as far as mentioned, also the color who turned out, and to make it more or less always in the same color is not so easy. But finally, I think it was a huge success because we could really show up this we could do easily and fast, and recycling for us is definitely a route we have to go, and this we could show to the market.
So, Oscar, what is AkzoNobel doing when it comes to innovation sustainability, not least plastics? Maybe we should start with plastics.
Well, I think the journey starts with innovation in general, and it touches everybody on a very personal level. And for me, what really drives the message home 8 years ago, when I got told by the WWF that we at the moment consume 1.6 Earths in 1 year. So already now, if you look at your watch, we already have consumed everything the company and the Earth has to generate. And if everybody would have the same lifestyle as in America, we actually would already now need 4 or 5 planets. The population is growing from 8 billion to 10 billion people around the world. I myself live in Asia. I see middle class coming up, and everybody aspires a certain lifestyle. And it's absolutely clear, and it has to touch yourself personally, that something has to change. So that innovation, how do you make it happen? So we have a long legacy in our company, how to make innovation work, and it starts really setting a bold target. And setting a target is not good enough. So we really committed ourselves by 2050 to be completely carbon neutral, and we're already making good progress along that way, but you also have to be very public about it. If it's an internal target, you don't see the behavior change, you really have to set a public target there. And then we have basically a couple of pillars which drives the behavior change, both inside and outside of the company. We put our money where our mouth is, so senior executives all across the board, we are incentivized also on whether or not we achieve the sustainability targets that we make. every time we make a research decision, we also spend 2 billion euros in research every year. We will have a matrix that not only looks at the financial metrics, but also at the social metrics, on what it does with people, and also what it does with the environment. And only when it touches all those 4 points, you will actually see a decision being pulled through. So and over time, you see that more of our products in our portfolio have eco-benefits. Already more than half of our portfolio offer eco-friendly benefits. And in the area of marine, we now come out with products that are not only clean, but also biocide-free. And we already have more than 5,000 vessels sailing with Intersleek, and that has generated 3 billion euro in fuel savings for the industry. So that's a good example where we see innovation moving forward.
And you're also part of Ocean Cleanup.
Yeah, we feel that it's not only good that we actually bring solutions to the market that offer better sustainability moving forward. The Team Axel Nobel boat was the second boat together with Tide of Plastics to have kit installed so we measure how much plastics and the water composition is. But we also joined up with the Ocean Cleanup that actually set us targets to clean up the ocean of the plastic. So you've seen this morning the heat map. So one of the biggest garbage patches is actually in the Great Pacific. So if we now are in the process of deploying all the assets, we hope that within 2030 we will have cleaned up half of the plastic in the Great Pacific garbage patch. So that's a great undertaking.
By 2030, half of the plastics will be gone.
Yes.
Good. We sincerely, yes. Anders, you work with water. Your mission is to provide drinkable water, and you are providing the drinkable water in the village, right?
Correct, yes.
So we've heard that microplastics contaminates also the drinking water. What are you doing to actually raise awareness on this question and to change it?
So I think our vision is about water without plastics, and for us that means 2 things. It means oceans without plastic pollution, and it means drinking water without microplastics and other contaminants. We think those 2 questions are interrelated because the reason for people using single-use bottles to drink is because there's no other means of drinking water, and you have to hydrate. So we believe that by taking action, by providing solutions which is tangible, we can actually change the behavior where we use single-use plastic bottles. So it's going back to what we as consumers do every day. And as Mr. Eliasson said before, we believe that no one can do everything, but if everyone just stops buying single-use plastic bottles and instead carry this one, that's a good start.
And how do you make that happen?
Well, I mean, by being here, by being out, talking about it, educating people how this is connected to the problem, and also providing the solution. So for us, it's about bringing out the clear. I mean, you have hopefully at least seen the water stations out in the village and tried the water, but it's about providing that so that people can have that opportunity to make that choice.
I can actually jump in because we were together in the Hong Kong summit, and our Chinese office actually changed over to their system.
They changed?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's a concrete effect of...
That's good, yeah.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good example. So the previous business panel, they were talking about business as actually a driver for change. I guess you are all into that. What can you do to even more drive innovation, sustainability, not least in the plastic area? Günther?
In our case, recycling is definitely a very important topic. We are invested, we have 3 plants worldwide. We are invested since 2004 in recycling. And in Europe, we just built up the last 5 years 2 plants, and it was a difficult time the last years when the oil price dropped and the recycling material was more expensive than the new material. But now, the last 3 years, 2 years, you can really feel that the whole industry is interested and the recycling is picking up. And for us, I think that's definitely a solution, it's on the table. We know it's working not only for the bottle. We did a lot of other examples, and we have to start from designing doing the right things from the design. Also for recycling, we have to use, we are only using two materials. We are only using polyolefins and PET. That's also important, as we heard before, to separate these different type of plastics. It's a problem. So we can do a lot more, but I think that's definitely very important that we can show and we do it ourselves so that we can drive the recycling content.
Horace, what challenges do you see ahead in going through with this work?
Well, first thing is we need all to be humble and admit no one have the answer to all the questions. So staying and living in a silo will not take us far. So the most important element is transformative partnership. It's connecting externally because, you know, every industry has got its own challenge. But when you connect and like ourselves and people like, you know, exceptional, like Alpla or Pure Cycle, they are startup working on real breakthrough innovation in recycling, or connecting with NGOs or the Ellen MacArthur, you find solution. But the problem, Mia, is not about the technological solution. We will find them sooner or later. A lot of them are happening. The problem is consumer behavior. And that's where we have a moral imperative as companies to drive through the brand, the voice of our brand, a respectable and then sensible, you know, behavior by every consumer of how we use the very, what we call finite resource in a world where consumption is increasing exponentially.
So the technology is not the problem, it's already there, as you say. It's humans that are the problem. We are the problem as consumers. Do you agree to that?
I agree. I think we are the problem, and we are also the solution. We are the first generation probably seeing what's happening to the oceans. I think the next big thing is that people will start to realize, as we have heard today, what happens to human health when this goes into the water ecosystem and the food value chain. So I think it's about driving the awareness, having like-minded people making a change, like you do, like providing examples of how you can do it. So yeah, that's basically the fundament to change the consumer behavior. It's about education. That's also, and I must say, I'm impressed by the work that Volvo Ocean Race has done over this campaign. It's been a magnificent platform to communicate a science message to a much broader audience, as Charlie said before, than they would ever have reached before otherwise.
Oscar, coming back to business, business has actually moved forward quite a few steps the last couple of years. Why is that? Why is business more on the sustainability train now than maybe a decade ago?
I think it's good to realize that sustainability is good business. It's not a contradictory. So one of the big messages I give in all these conferences is it is good business. And you have to find that sweet spot between what makes business sense and what is good for the environment, and only proceed when it touches that sweet spot. And there is a good possibility, and indeed partnerships, you see a fundamental change in the industry of much more partnership. Volvo mentioned it this morning. There's a lot of waste that we can cut out of the value chain. In our case, 90% of what is going wrong, if you like, is either with our suppliers or in the application of our products at the customer. All the waste is being generated in terms of packaging and the like. There we really see more willingness, because actually people see they can make money in the process. And unfortunately, that is an important driver already on the short term to bring change about. But it can be done with the right mindset, absolutely.
So it's actually good for business to be sustainable. But in the short run, Günther and Fares, it can be expensive.
Definitely. Definitely, it can be more expensive, but I think that's also a question of time. I think also legislation will be important. We have to think more in cycles. That means we are talking in our plants, we are talking bottle-to-bottle recycling. For some other, we could easily sell the material into other streams, but we are really talking because we want to show our customer that we can do bottle-to-bottle, but it's a little bit more expensive, but it's not that more that together we cannot afford it.
But at the same time, Mia, we have lots of studies that suggest more than 60% of the consumer are prepared to pay premium for sustainable product. There is another study that suggests that when you compare a non-sustainable product versus sustainable product, the difference in sales is 4%. While true, the technology could be today more expensive, but at the same time, consumers want, to have sustainable product. And with time, innovation must find the end, high-performing and affordable.
And then you see in our industry, especially business to business, that we also get new business models as such. It's not only about the products, it's also about the business models. So we were the first to work together with the gold standard to come up with carbon credits for the marine industry. So actually you create another incentive for ship owners to move from biocidal solutions, which are relatively polluting, to completely clean foul release technologies in this area. You see all kind of business model where we have pay-for-performance schedules, where economic benefits also combined with sustainability solutions. And that is really exciting to see working with startups. We're one of the founding members of the Sustainable Shipping Initiatives, where we come up with green financing. So we help industry to come over that initial bump, to move to the more sustainable future.
We will talk more about the finance sector in the next panel. So, new collaboration, new partnerships, new business models. Business is moving in the right direction and being actually a driver of the change. Thank you very much for coming today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So moving on to a little bit of a different perspective, the institutional perspective now on tackling plastic pollution. In this panel, we will meet a city representative, NGO, and the government. Please welcome up on the stage Carolina Skog, who's Minister for the Environment in Sweden. Welcome. Anna Ledin from the Department of the Environmental Administration at the City of Gothenburg. Welcome. And Håkan Wirtén, who is Secretary General, I need to see this to get it right, yes, of WWF Sweden. Welcome. So, institutional perspective, how can you actually support what we're talking about? Carolina, let me start by asking you, EU has put forward a plastic strategy. And I read in some article that you say it's a good first step.
It is. Firstly, that it is in place is a very good thing. And we share the knowledge base, how the problem is defined by the European Commission. And we're very happy about some of the ways forward that pointed out. They point at fishing gear, lost fishing gear as a problem. And we see a lot of lost fishing gears, for example, on the west coast of Sweden. They also point at single-use plastic, acknowledging that the use of them has to go down. And they point at microplastics. My worry is maybe the implementation tempo. From Sweden, we want the Commission to act quickly. And some of the roads ahead they're pointing out are quite slow.
How quick would you like to see the implementation?
As fast as possible. For example, in terms of drinking water, it should have been yesterday, obviously. So we think it's very important to act swiftly and to have regulation in place quickly so that all the action is, we see a lot of action in terms of plastic now, and it's very important that we get it right from the start so we don't have to come back and redo some of them. And one issue that we think is very important to get right from the start is the use of term biodegradable. We see on the market some products that are marketed as biodegradable, and it's a very tricky term, and it must be used right. To a consumer, we think that most consumers think that biodegradable means it's more or less like an apple. You can just toss it away, and that is not true. So it's very important that we regulate the use of the term biodegradable, so it's used correctly, so we don't get products on the market where it's used incorrectly and where consumers get something that is not what they think it is.
So that was EU. What's the Swedish government doing on the plastic issue?
We have a lot of work going on. Firstly, we have an SOU. I've hired a researcher to do a work on plastics, acknowledging that some of the issues are very, very complex, and it's very important to be knowledge-based and to get it right. So she's working now for 2 years, and I had the first report, and that touched, for example, on the biodegradability. We also do a lot of practical work. We support the municipalities here on the West Coast that have a very heavy burden with plastics on their beaches. And we've also started looking at the to how to reduce the single-use plastic. We do think it needs to come down. But we're also looking at a specific issue that are very urgent and are worrisome. It was mentioned here earlier. China has shut their borders from import of plastic waste. And we do not know today where the streams are going. And we are concerned that they might go to countries that cannot take care of it.
And what can you do about that? Because that was the point of the person asking the question.
I think there's two things that needs to be done. As countries, we are looking into the Basel Convention, which is regulating the trade of waste, to change that and to regulate plastic better. That would give countries information on where the plastic streams are going. But also, business must take the responsibility to be transparent. It's just not good enough to take in plastic waste streams and export it to Asia and not knowing where it's ending up. They have to take the responsibility the whole way.
And how can you make them take this responsibility? Are you talking legislation, or?
Yes, I think yes, indeed. But that legislation does take time, and this is urgent. So I'm appealing directly to businesses. You need to take responsibility today and to be transparent about what's happening to the waste streams all the way down. Because we cannot have a situation where we export plastics out of Europe and it's ending up in beaches in Philippines. We can't have it like that. That has to stop now. If it's happening, it has to stop now.
And those, yes. And those can be really big volumes also. We're here talking about plastic straws, but this can be really big volumes. Now, Håkan, I read a report a couple of weeks ago where you actually mentioned that if we don't do anything about, this was about the Mediterranean, in 2050 we could have more plastics than fish in the Mediterranean.
Yeah, terrible.
Terrible and really worrying.
It's really terrible. But don't get me wrong now, but the plastic pollution of the oceans can also be a gift.
A gift?
How can that be? Well, when industry and factories started out a long time ago, we saw the pollution of the factories, and we said we have to build higher chimneys. Higher chimneys, higher chimneys. And that's the way we have been treating the oceans. We have been overfishing. When that species is gone, try another one. And when all those are gone, go further out, go deeper, until it's almost empty, right? And I think this is, we have known for such a long time that the fish stock has been overfished. 90% is overfished to the limit. And we know about the acidification of the oceans, we know about the climate change, the coral reefs are bleaching and all that, but we have been sort of shouting into space, right? It's like, oh, it looks pretty good. The water looks blue and nice and everything. But now we have this. I'm a big football fan, and right now there is something going on in Russia, I heard, and suddenly there is this huge interest in the world about football, about soccer. And this is what we have with the plastic. There is so much energy, so much passion, because we see something is wrong with the ocean.
So you mean when it's visible for us, we can see the plastic, we know that the fish is actually eating the plastic and we're eating the fish. So
yeah.
it
seems
tangible.
Like that, and then you get the health issues and everything. It comes very close to yourself. And let's use that to turn around the whole situation about the oceans, which has been going on for a long, long time, to be honest.
So you're actually quite happy about the plastics showing up?
Of course I'm not.
Beaches.
I said that, don't get me wrong, because I think it's
but it can raise awareness.
It's absolutely terrible. But we haven't had the levers, we haven't had the buttons to push really, but now we do in this way. So let's use this terrible situation this is just the tip of an iceberg also. We just know little and it's getting worse and worse. So let's use that also to address the whole situation and the picture of the
oceans. So do you agree with Dee Kafari? She said that there's a growing sense of urgency and it's a very good moment now to really get some things going here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I know you, Anna, in Gothenburg, you're doing quite a lot. You have a couple of quality objectives related to the sea, to the oceans as well?
Yes, we do. We have adopted our own local environmental quality objectives, and that's adopted from the Swedish environmental quality objectives, of course. And one is addressing the sea. It's talking about a sea imbalance, and it's talking about the coastal areas and the archipelagos, which is very special here in Gothenburg, of course. Among these quality objectives, we have a sub-objective that's specifically addressing discharge of plastics to the sea. At the moment, we have a sub-objective saying that we should reduce the discharge of plastics from the city. However, this is not that easy, actually, because we are not sure about how much is actually transported. That's part of the trick. How do we actually measure how much is transported? We talk about waste from the city. We talk about single-use plastics that we throw away. It's raining and it's going into the sea. In this case, first into the river and then into the sea. We're talking about plastic bags. We can see them, visible, rather big ones. We also talk about the microplastics, which you can't see. We know that we both from traffic and, for instance, from the artificial lawns, we have a transport of microplastics. And we work on that at the moment to actually strengthen this sub-objective. It's up for a political decision, I hope, early this autumn. Although we have elections, I hope they will take that decision. And that says that we are going to reduce the discharge of plastics to the sea with 50%. And keep it low. As I said, we are not sure how big it is at the moment. So the question is if we have to find out how big it is at the moment or just decide that we have to reduce it all the way we can. And that's, I think, what we need to do, actually.
So you're about to change the wording to actually sharpen it a bit there.
Yes.
Now, what do all you say? You can use the regulation to push forward. You can use incentive carrots and sticks. Håkan, coming from an NGO, what would you say is the most effective way of changing behavior?
You mean consumers or companies or governments or
Open
all of
question,
us? Or?
You can choose. And
all right, I choose all.
Okay,
I choose all.
That was what I knew you would be doing.
So we need, from governments, we need really international, legally international agreements that really we come together on this. Together was the word, right? Coming together on international agreements that say that this is not to be at all. And that has, of course, like in other big international agreements, to be connected to the national work, the national goals, and it has to be near in the future. So in like 2030, it has to be all recycled and 100% recycled and ban the single-use plastics.
Ban the single-use plastics.
So that's for the government.
100% recycled at the latest by 2030.
Yeah, sooner the better.
Binding agreements.
Yeah.
Carolina, is it time for a Paris agreement?
Well, that was only
for
the governments, right?
That was only the governments. We'll come back to the rest of us. Carolina, what do you say? Do we need a Paris agreement for the oceans?
Actually, already last year, the world came together to talk about how to save the oceans. Sweden and Fiji took an initiative and summoned the world. For the first time, the world met in New York and talked about how to save the ocean. And that conference has spurred a number of initiatives, nationally, but at least, and also globally and regionally. So there's a lot of action going on the work on oceans, and from different perspectives already happening. We're talking about acidification, plastic pollution, saving the coral reefs, but also things like ocean literacy. And I'm actually happy I have an announcement, because from the Swedish government, we are now, I can announce another 7.8 million euros going into 13 different global projects working on the implementation of SDG 14, the SDG on the ocean. And this is a follow-up on the last year's conference. And we are now financing a number of the initiatives that came out of that conference.
So, around, yes.
Yeah,
around 80 million Swedish for another ocean projects, couple of ocean
13, we selected 13 global projects by NGOs, UN agencies, and so forth. And the work is happening now.
So you mean you don't need a Paris Agreement for the oceans because it's already happening?
We don't need to sit down again and talk about what we should do. No, we are. The time is to act. We know what to do in broad terms. Of course, we know we need science, but it's time to act, not to talk in meeting conferences.
Exactly what we're doing here, actually. So when we've talked here, we go out and make some action. Anna, what would you like to see from the national level to spur your work in Gothenburg on this issue?
Well, I think from the national level, I think it's very important, which has been mentioned several times here today, that's collaboration. We need to work on the same track. We need to have the same aims or goals and objectives. I think from the national point of view, of course, we are asking for legislation, but I also think that we need very much support when we are testing things. And I think what we can do in the city is actually to test. We can show it works. We don't have any single-use plastics here today, for instance. This event is environmental certified by actually my department here. And that's a way to working on this, to make sure that we show that it's possible to make the changes. And it doesn't cost too much. It's possible to do it. And I think that kind of support. And I think what we actually could do is we could be even better in showing what we are doing. What things are going on. For instance, in the city here, we are now looking quite a lot on the artificial lawns, that we know we have quite a lot of discharge of microplastics. We have it in the regular environmental inspections now as a new part to inspect how much is actually released from these lawns, but also to try new materials. So those departments in the city that are responsible for the artificial lawns, they are testing new materials to see if we can reduce these discharges of microplastics. I think some examples, and we could do much more on that. And I think we need the support from the national level to get it out and show the examples.
So cities can be showcase and good examples of things.
Yeah.
Håkan, coming back to you now, what else do you need and want?
Well, from business sector, I need some, and I want some, and I wish, and I desire bold decisions.
Don't you think they were bold enough, the business leaders here?
They can be much more.
Oh, they can be
much more bold and bolder and whatever. And because I think the market is ready. Time is right. People are. You can see it in market after market that people are asking for a way of helping the future of our children. And I think the companies that are the boldest, they are the winners. Someone said you have to find that sweet spot, but you have to really push that.
You have to push the sweet spot.
Oh, it's sweet back here, it's sweet over there. Being really bold and take those decisions that we are moving away from plastic, we are moving away, we are recycling. It's upstream. When it's in the ocean, it's already too late, right? So it's upstream at the source, as many have spoken about today. So
you want a bolder business, you want them to push the sweet spot even further?
Yeah, because consumers can only do so much. And the big producers have a big responsibility of helping the consumers upstream.
And the ban of plastic bags, Carolina, will that become a reality?
It might be, maybe on the European level. We have a single market, so it's always better to regulate markets on the European levels. And we are expecting the Commission to propose ban on some single-use plastic, but it's complex. You know, we must remember that single-use plastic also is doing a lot of good, as in terms of food containing. It can be very efficient. So we must have a balance of acting swiftly and sturdily, but not being over enthusiastic and just tossing away plastic where it does good. But one thing that is, I think, the biggest hurdle when I see in the not short term but in the middle long term is chemicals in plastics, because that's a hurdle for recycling. Because we don't have any transfer of information on which chemicals are in different products, be it dangerous or not. If you buy a material for recycling, of course you want to know what is in it. And we don't have that system yet. So what I am working on, what I see a need for, is not a Paris deal on the ocean, but a Paris deal on chemicals.
A Paris Agreement on chemicals?
Yes. And we will launch in New York in July an alliance of countries that are coming together to create a Paris deal on chemicals. The global trade is global, and the work and the regulation of chemicals also needs to be global to make sure that recycling is safe.
So what you're actually saying here is that in July in New York you're going to start this Paris Agreement for chemicals?
Yes, we're launching it.
You're just dropping news here every time I give you the word. That's interesting. Håkan, what do you say about that? Is it a good idea?
Yeah, I mean, sure. I mean, this is of course the unknown part of the plastics and everything. So of course this is something that we must know much more about. We don't know enough. So of course we have to have more knowledge and get into these activities that can change that. Of course.
Do you have questions for the panel? Yes. I think you have to keep it very close to the mouth.
Does it work now?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Christian Merup. I'm working for Blue Water, building up a venture trying to get rid of as many plastic bottles as possible. Usually, we tend to focus on solutions, but I'm actually going to ask a question about the problem. Because when I started this journey, I have learned a lot on what happens with plastic bottles that comes out in the oceans, how it blends with the water, how that destroys our animals and our humans as well. So my question is, if we don't make any bold decisions now, how bad can this be in 20, 30, 50 years? What's going to happen?
So if we just don't do anything, Håkan, how bad will it be? You said that in 2050 we will have more plastics than fish in the Mediterranean Ocean.
Yeah, that's what we hear from science, that this is the prognosis that we can foresee. So that is really, really, really bad. So we cannot go there. We have billions of people are living next to the oceans. Billions of people are dependent on food and proteins from the oceans. So we just cannot go there.
Carolina, how bad can it be?
It's actually very hard to imagine how bad it actually can be. The amount of plastic use is more and more for every day. As the economy is, which is a good thing, of course. The economy is getting better worldwide, and the amount of chemicals used and put into plastics is new every day. And this is very hard to imagine how this will interact with the other problems related to the seas. The seas are stressed by overfishing, is stressed by chemicals, is stressed by climate change, and then also plastic pollution is added a further pressure. And how this will interact, I try not spending so much time thinking about that, becoming depressed. But it's very important that we have to act now. We have no time to wait. That's for sure.
So you agree on this one, Håkan?
I just wanted to add one thing before the end of this, and that's We've just turned the tide, so it seems, on the big whales and of the oceans, getting away from hunting and so on. And now we're feeding them plastics. And I'm really scared what's going to happen to these fantastic creatures. And I'm getting back to us as human beings, as consumers, because sometime I heard about one of these boats, the crew that said, they came to the conclusion that every decision that we take, is it going to make the boat go faster? Is it going to make the boat go faster? And I think that is a question to all of us. Am I making this world better? Am I making it more sustainable or not? That's a question to all of us all the time. Does it make the boat go faster? Does it make the world more sustainable?
I have 2 kids. They pose this question every day. Every time I go shop with my kids, they say no plastic bags. I can never take any plastic bags. And then I said to them, we were talking about climate footprints. I said to them, well, this trip we're doing to the Canary Islands, a lot of footprints compared to the plastic bags. And my 11-year-old son said, well, Mom, you need to say no to a lot of plastic bags then. Yes. Because they wanted to do the trip. So, but the thinking is going on. We have another question here. You have a mic already.
Keith Freegard from Action Polymers in the UK. I think what we're seeing today is a recognition that the growth of plastics and the dealing of plastics in our waste system in the developed world has got a bit of a big market failure. But we're clever enough, rich enough and responsible enough to do something about that. My question concerns the developing world where the big population growth is going on, because those population growths are seen as target markets for sellers of fast-moving consumer goods and plastic products. So how do we prevent a duplication of the market failure we've created in Europe by doing exactly the same in the growth countries of the world, where if we don't do it right, correct product design, integrated waste management system, only putting products on the market where there's true responsibility. If we don't repeat that there, we'll just create another huge market failure in those growth countries. How can we change that?
So this little small question to end this panel. Carolina.
I think we need to do 2 things. We need to regulate markets here to make sure that products that are put into market are safe, they are reusable, recyclable, and setting the standards for markets here, because standards are set when markets are strong. That's one thing. And the other thing is, of course, using aid to develop a safe waste management in the developing world. We have a lot of knowledge, we have a lot of good technology in place, and we need to make that transfer of knowledge and technology fast.
And the companies as front runners also. Sorry.
Anna.
Yeah. But I also think it's important, once again, that we also show that it's possible with alternatives. And alternatives doesn't reduce the standards. They can actually be much better. And I think we have those examples, and I think we continue to develop those examples, where we can show we can do it in this way, and your life will be as good as if you do it this way. I think that is something we actually can do.
So finally, how would you label yourself? We were talking about optimists, pessimists, worried optimists. Carolina, what are you?
I think I'm on the same level as Jan. I'm a worried optimist.
Worried optimist. Anna?
I'm always an optimist. Always.
And Håkan?
Yeah, that's the only way I can think. Optimistic, but I'm worried.
So kind of worried optimism here. Minister Carolina Skog, Anna Ledin, Håkan Wirtén, thank you very much for coming here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So the last panel of today is actually about one business sector that is targeting this issue, and they've been stepping up the last couple of years. It's about finance industry, the need for investor support in this issue. Please welcome up on stage Charlotte Peter-Gonitska, who's chair of the Development Assistant Committee at OECD. Give her a round of applause. Marie Baumgartz, who's head of sustainability at SEB Group. Hi. And Magnus Borelius, CFO at Gothenburg City. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
So, moving into the finance sector, Charlotte, you, prior to OECD, you were at SIDA, Swedish International Development Corporation, and at SIDA you actually led efforts to stimulate private sector engagement in development activities. What can you say? You've been following this through a couple of years or decades, actually. What can you say about the business sector and specifically the finance sector? What has happened the last couple of years?
Well, I think I'm a concerned optimist. I think we can see examples of good initiatives out there, and we will hear about them. Green bonds. We also hear about blue bonds, actually, around oceans. But I want to see more of sharing risk. Development aid can be used in bigger programs together with private sector if we converge on what the outcome and the aim is. And we have worked in silos, so aid has been there, dealing with it, and finance has been there. But we cannot continue like that, because we know to be able to solve these issues, we need to work together. And the finance, I mean, the resources are with private sector. So what we need to do more is to make sure that we can use the instruments we have. And for instance, SIDA has something that other governments could learn from. And that's my job today, to exchange and inspire others. SIDA can use a guarantee, which means that private sector can share the risk through public money from Sweden and do, innovate with private sector. And the news, it's not news, the old news is that Swedish government hasn't lost, well, almost not a penny in using these guarantees tools, because we've been successful in the projects we've done. But the thing is that we need also, I think, to dare to fail together, because we cannot just invest in the things that we already know are the solutions. And that's where I'm a little bit concerned, is that when governments and private sector work together, we are a little bit afraid still to be associated with each other. And NGO sector is tough on both. And I think that's what we mean by being transformational or new, is to dare to be open that we don't know yet the solution to all of this. Money is involved. We might not be successful. And it's a tough one because it's taxpayers' money. So that's what we're dealing with all the time. And private sector is saying we need regulations. I don't buy that, or standards. I think private sector needs to be more engaged with public sector and NGOs, and dare, a little bit what Håkan said, dare to do a little bit more bold, take more bold initiatives.
More boldness, because you've been involved in this, putting NGOs, government and business together. I know I've been following this work you've been doing at SIDA for a couple of years. What has been the biggest challenges? You touch upon this a little bit now. It's kind of, in Swedish, beröringsskräck. How do we translate that? Afraid of touching each other and working too closely?
Yeah, and I think we have to respect that. We have different roles. I mean, public sector and NGOs are not here to do business. It's not about a mission creep. If we start to do that, we will fail. So we have our different roles. NGOs are watchdogs, and they should be skeptic as part of what they do. But what I find is that what Jan Eliasson talked about was so important in 2015. We didn't only decide on the SDGs. There was an agreement among all governments on how to finance this agenda. And the trillions that we need will come from private sector, not from public sector. And how can we, if that's true, how can we then avoid to be curious on how that can happen? And I still think that we have a way to go, not only with attitude, but actually with knowledge. There are very few people in my sector that has experience from the business sector, and vice versa. And when we engage a person from private sector in a development agency, a month later that person is lost in culture. So there is this people side, the corporate culture side, that I think we have to tackle a little bit more upfront.
Mm. Marie, how can a bank support this change that we're talking about? How can you be part of driving the change?
Exactly, by many ways, and I agree to this, the last thing that Charlotte said with swapping sides. I've been a banker now for a little bit more than a year, coming from telecom sector before and from advisory, I mean being a consultant, so I have a really broad background. And it's very interesting to change perspectives, because I think this is actually one way of finding new types of solutions which are needed. And here, I think the banks can be involved much, much more than they have been. It has been too much silos, and finding, having more problem-oriented way of looking at it, and a little bit too much of a blame game. If we look currently, we're actually having an anniversary, about the 10-year anniversary. In 2007, the EIB launched the first, or emitted the first, climate awareness bond in 2007. I think it was in June as well. And in 2008, 1 year later, the World Bank emitted the world's first green bond. And right now, so that was 10 years back. If we would go 10 years ahead and look back to where we are now, I hope that we would see new financial instruments, such as, for example, a plastic bond. Would be lovely to have.
A plastic bond?
Yes, why not? Or, I mean, we have, as Charlotte mentioned, blue bonds, but these are really early days. We would like to grow them, and here the financial sector can play a big role, because what we are doing, we are commercializing sustainability. And if we look at funds, for example, or bonds for that sake, imagine how it would be if everyone could invest your pension money into a fund which would simultaneously, as providing a return for your pension, simultaneously it would also have a positive impact. For example, removing plastic from ocean. So this is the shift where the financial sector can play a huge role in our indirect impact. So we can offer our customers both. Instead of having choose between return and impact, we can have both.
So when do you think we'll see plastic bonds?
If you ask me personally, yesterday, but pick up the phone and give us a call and let's discuss.
So if all of you 320 inside here pick up the phone for Marie.
I'll do that.
Yes,
Exactly.
we might have
We already
plastic
talked
bonds next year, maybe.
It's a journey, but what my message is that we are a part of this transformation, and we are doing this. We need to cooperate more. Yes.
Now, Magnus, talking about green bonds, we get back to green bonds because you were the head of Treasury in 5 years ago, I think, when it was. You were the first city in the world to issue a green bond.
Yeah, that's correct.
Tell us about it.
Tell us about that. Yeah, this was the first, I could say, the first city in the world to issue this green bond, and we had absolutely no idea what we were doing, because when you're the first in the world, you don't really know how to do it. And would there be any interest from the investors as well to buy this kind of bonds? I mean, we've issued bonds since mid-90s in the city of Gothenburg, and no one really cares, because the investors, they want their money back, they want us to pay the dividend, and that's about it. But when you added this sustainability touch here, something happened actually. And that is, we have to present to the investors exactly where the money is going, what kind of projects we are financing, and we also have to produce an impact report. What kind of impact does your money do on the environment? So when we did this back in 5 years, we didn't really know would there be any buyers of this bond. But when we issued the bond today in autumn 2013, we were overwhelmed by the interest from investors. So we more or less had to close the books pretty early, because there were so much investors we couldn't handle them all. And since then we have issued 5 more, and we have around 15% of the city's total outstanding debt of 40 billion today issued in green bonds and climate-friendly investments.
So it's actually a huge success.
Yes, it's a huge success in that way. Yeah.
So what's the next step?
The next step, I think, is to continue. But I also think that we are still trying, just practicing, learning, because how to measure the impact from one single currency and then what that will have on the environment is extremely hard to do it. So we're still learning and working together with the sustainability colleagues and the Treasury Department. But I think it's also important to move away from the project financing and going upwards to the organization. Let's say for the city's bond is green, or that corporate's bond is green, because you have the all sustainability work moved into the whole business model, whatever. If you're a corporate, if you're a municipality, it really doesn't matter in that way. I think that's the next step.
What would you say is the next step? You come from a bit of a different perspective. These guys have issued green bonds and now maybe plastic bonds, even if it's not yet a reality.
Well, I think one of the immediate next steps is to go from pilot projects to scale. We're still talking about not that many, and I think we need to encourage that. But I also think that it is important to stress that when we have public money involved, we need to make sure that the money that we invest from the public is truly developmental in nature, that it really impacts people for good. And we have, from the OECD, put in place a guidance or a recommendation on how to blend finance, where NGOs have been able to kind of put safeguards in place. And I honestly think to be able to scale, we need those kind of agreements or standards, because otherwise we run the risk of not trusting each other in this. There's a lot of distrust around what we're trying to do, and if we can put the measures in place to showcase that the actors that have to be involved, we talk about collaboration, we talk about multi-stakeholders, everybody has to be in the room, but there's not the case that we do trust each other's reason for doing this yet. And that's why we need this kind of guidance and recommendations, because it's a little bit of a silence. It's hindering and hampering more than we think. That action is not happening because of that.
So you need guidance, you need scale models, legislation?
Yes, part of legislation. And we heard from our minister before. I think the question that we heard on what do we do in this part of the world that can influence the developing part of the world, and I work with the developing side of the world. And if we look at the value chains, let me talk a little bit about another value chain, and that's batteries. We heard about the increased demand for batteries. But if you unpack that value chain, you end up in DRC, in Congo, with minerals and child labor. You have a marketplace in Africa where I think companies will try to compete to put out the recycling companies without regulations and standards in place. If we turn this into opportunities, we can create a fantastic development market for people in Africa where we want to invest and where our future markets are. If we don't focus on the risk in that value chain with this huge demand on batteries, we might create problems for millions of people in the markets where we want to invest, and that they won't be the customers of tomorrow. So we need to see this kind of conscious value chain. We need to work with a complete value chain, and I think Sweden can really be a leader in this, really be a leader in this.
And where do you think we are in the balance, would you say?
Can I come back and respond to that? I honestly don't know, because part of the problem in implementation of the SDGs right now is that we have governments who, some shy away from even admitting that we have a climate problem, and others lead, like France and Sweden. And in that context, I don't know, really, how much we are willing to spend on the consciousness of value chains like this.
Okay, so we give you homework to find that out, and maybe next year you can come back and tell us. Now, legislation from the finance sector here, Marie and Magnus, people in the finance industry never or seldom ask for more legislation. Marie, would you say it's needed in this case or not?
Yes, exactly. But before answering that, I would like to tag on to what Magnus said here. Regarding measuring impact, because that's a bit of the trick with it, and that was what was defined for the green bonds. And for taking the next step, this is the question mark we all need to battle. And I'm very positive you have been pushing us into this field and into taking the next step. And these are exactly the type of edgy and bold, brave clients and municipalities that we would like to see more of. So that is, but the big hurdle, I would say, that's the taxonomy. What is sustainable, what is green, and what is should we define some kind of plastic bond? How will it look like? What types of plastic? We just heard from the academia and from all the myriads of details in here. We need to sort that out and navigate in that one for being able to make an instrument out of it. So that's a bit of the hurdle.
The evaluation part could be pretty tricky.
Yes, and EU is actually now trying to reorient capital flows towards resolving the SDGs. And I'm super happy and the SEB to be part of that technical committee. So we will actually battle the taxonomy during the next year. And that would, as I see it, open up for more legislation and regulation. Because I guess I'm probably the only person in the whole financial industry who feels that there is still some room for more regulation on sustainability.
Probably the only
That was
one.
brave.
That's right, yes.
Yes.
Magnus, Marie mentioned plastic bonds. Is that a good alternative?
I think it's a good alternative, but it's also important here to see that we don't sort of crash the market in that way. With having plastic bonds, you have green bonds, you have social bonds, you have that bond, you have that bond, and suddenly you don't have any market, because to make a market work, you need some sort of volume also as well. So if you could more pack it into the same sort of a sustainable market in that way, I think that is a better way to go than sort of divide it into different colors, even if the purpose is very good.
I can say my colleagues agree to that. Yeah, I'm the one who wants multiple flavors, but they would like the volume as you, same as you.
So it's a bit of a balance there. So questions for the panel. Do we have anything, Gustav, on Twitter?
No questions actually.
It's just crystal clear, everything here.
Yeah, and I can say that people are quoting all the panels, all the speakers. So there's a lot of activity going on online.
So the words have wings.
But can I just say one thing that I think we also need to put something into perspective. When we solve, for instance, a plastic problem in oceans, you know, OECD is all about figures and facts and economical data. And I have in my script here that the oceans market economy can double before 2030 if we invest in it. And 40 million people can earn their living full time globally if we really invest in building the ocean market. And obviously we cannot do that if we don't tackle the problems. But there are people who are perhaps more optimistic about the opportunity than what we might have been here today. But I do think that we need to remind ourselves that it's the whole SDG agenda is about inclusive growth within planetary boundaries, and you can't get that without peace. But it's really the balancing act of people and planet, and it's not just solving a problem; it's creating the opportunities by solving the problem that we can really do if we focus on oceans more broadly. And I think that's important, that a plastic bond, yes, but in a context of oceans and the SDGs would be really what can be done.
And to be honest, Charlotte, we're talking about good examples from the finance industry, but the majority of the money is still not in place for the SDG agenda.
Absolutely not. No, I mean, I think that we see a lot of interest and business as a driver in this, but we haven't really cracked going from pilots to scale. And I think it is, when you listen to people, some say it's because the projects are not scalable or they're not bankable. And there's a lot of voices saying that the capacity in developing countries to invest in them is too low. The financial capacity, the institutional capacity is too low to invest. And again, that's where I think my sector, the development aid sector, could perhaps work with capacity building in a context of investment rather than capacity building over there on the side and perhaps not a context. And that is perhaps the new way of working, to understand that we need all stakeholders in the room at the same time, doing each other's parts and not wait for somebody to build capacity and then 20 years down the road there is private investments. That's not going to happen.
So capacity building together with the finance sector. That would be your take. What would be yours, Marie? What would you be doing to advance this agenda?
Yes, I think this is a bit of a shift in the mindset, actually, for the industry. And because previously, banks and people, providing credits, you have done it mainly for general corporate purposes. Mm-hmm. And so that has been general corporate purposes, that has been what has been analyzed when providing credits. And we are supporting innovation and entrepreneurship. And this is what innovation and entrepreneurship is about. So to stressing that even more, and going from, to quote our CEO, he said that general corporate purposes is not good enough anymore. I want to do what my money does. That's what he is saying. So building this into processes and systems, that's a way of steering financial flows towards the wanted future we prefer.
So that's your, Magnus, what would be your next move?
I would say 5 years ago it was a small market, it was just $13 billion. Today it's around $150 billion, still a very small market. So I think you have to scale it up to management, tell the rest of the organization what to do, take away some motivation, add some discipline and solve the problem.
Take away some motivation, add some discipline and solve the problem.
Yes.
Oh, that seems very easy.
It's not easy, but it's discipline needed.
Maybe that is actually a good note to finish on because it sounded so easy here, the worried optimist. Magnus, Marie, Charlotte, thank you very much for joining us here today.
Thank you very much.
Now, we've been given the challenging tasks to sum up this morning's session to the very right person. It's actually Lisa Emilia Svensson, who's Director of Oceans at UN Environment. Please give her a round of applause.
Thanks. Thank you all, and what a tremendous challenge to summarize all this fantastic capacity and great ideas that you have presented here. But I wanted to take the starting point with Jan Eliasson that said this morning, we need to have peace with nature. And the question is, why is that? Because in the end, it's also peace with ourselves. And we know that we have tremendous pressure on our natural resources, food, energy, and water. And we need this to survive. We are growing a growing population around the world. And just, for example, we mentioned here, there were some questions about Asia. Asia had a tremendous economic growth, but it was not followed by a sustainable waste management, treatment facilities. So we know that most countries and the plastic that comes into our ocean come from Asia. But we shouldn't blame them only, because we're also importing products from Asia. So we're all part of this globalization, the trade all around the world. So we're all part of this problem. But I think it's really important to address that we need to look into where the plastic problem or the production comes from. And if we look into the continent of Africa, which is a growing population, 80 person every minute is going to be born in Africa to 250. So in total, 2.5 billion people. And if Africa is going to have the same economic development as we have had, we can just imagine that there will be no fish and there will be only sewage and plastic in our oceans. So that's sort of setting the scene, or it's an urgently call what we can do. And I think a part of this is, of course, also, as was mentioned, that we need not only hydro diplomacy, but also ocean diplomacy. How does ocean link into our human world? We have 70% of the Earth is ocean, and that's quite important. And when we talk about blue economy, I think we haven't mentioned that concept, but a lot of the economic growth that we're all depending on comes from also the marine environment. How do we do that in a sustainable way? Learn from the previous economic models. That is the foundation to tackle also the plastic problem. And I think we heard about the plastic problem. We know that every minute a garbage truck is pulled with plastic in the ocean worldwide. And we often talk about the plastic, but we know there's other problems in the ocean. The point with the plastic, it's so visible. Everyone understands when we see these beaches and rivers, plastic is all over, and it's not right. It's just totally wrong. And obviously, it's the canary bird in the mines. It tells us what else is going on in the ocean that we need to solve. And just to mention, we heard the coral reef, and we lost 20%, 1/5 of the coral reef for the last 30 years. And we can go on and on and on. At the same time, we also need to focus on the positive change, because we can change it in a way that we see the business opportunities in changing the markets to be the core driver in all this. And I think also finally talking about the plastic problems and the microplastic, I think it was really interesting to hear that microplastic attracting chemicals, chemicals attracting hormones or affect hormones, hormones affecting our fertility, fertility affecting our whole future generation. And what do we do with all that? So I think those stories need to be told and communicated in a very broad sense. And from the UN Environment, we have a Clean Seas campaign that the whole message is to mobilize everyone to be aware, to educate, and to take action. And we have currently 50 countries signing up to this. And as part of this global effort with the Volvo Ocean Race, we had so many commitments from cities, governments, etc., just joining this cause that we have been working on a very global scale. And I think it's worth mentioning India was the last country to sign up at the World Environment Day, the 5th of June. And India is 1.3 billion people. And Modi assigned that they will phase out all single-use plastic. It's a tremendous effort to do, and this is just moving ahead very fast. And a part of this is also, I think, I wanted to draw the story that when Håkan Samuelsson and we went to Alicante and we did the first beach cleanup, it's not that we can clean the ocean with beach cleanups, but it is awareness and education tool. And it was an eye-opening at that time, what is actually going on in our ocean. But how quick a private sector, a leader in the private sector, could for a few months, seeing this and being touched upon the huge problem and actually making a change in a few months. Phase out single-use plastics in cafeteria and restaurants, and here today announce the ambition to have 25% recycled plastic materials in the future of the cars. And it's not only about the company in itself, it's also the pressure it puts on the whole factory or the industry, which in itself. And it's showing that business take a leadership and can push action forward. And I think that's really crucial to emphasize. And as, of course, we work with government, but we also need to have this redesigned. We have Stena Recycling. How could we sort out? How could we recycle, reuse material? So it's sort of a closed loop, which we call circular economy. That will create an economy, a product line that will drive the force in itself. And we, as UN Environment and government, do not always have those bright ideas and dynamic force. So we need to have this collaboration, working with the private sector, working with the government to link this all in together. And I think that's really crucial. It was also mentioned that we definitely need to, when you have a water leakage at home, what do? You don't start to clean up the water. You stop the tap. And that's what we also, of course, have to do. And then we start with the cleanup. But the cleanup is a very good innovation tool on how we could move on all this. So clearly the business sector has to be there. They have to drive this together with the government. And I think also in terms of finding these new business models that will also create a market that could also change into those whole circular economy that we really need for everything to change. And a sort of awareness and educational aspect that we've been talking about. We had so many cleanups. We have India cleanup. We have in Indonesia. In Indonesia, it's now mobilizing the whole army to clean up the rivers, because that's a tremendous problem in those parts of the world. It's not a warfare. It's a war to save the nature. And I think this also links into the peace with the nature, which is a very clear message. So when we talk about partnerships, and I think no government can do this alone, because we know when government, and we talk about them, we talk with them, and we're really driving them to take action. And sometimes we heard that today, we need to have a global convention on plastic. The problem is, it's not plastic in itself that's always the problem. It's what we do with it. When it becomes plastic pollution, oceans and rivers and pathways. So what we need to do is to create a partnership where everybody have different roles. And for example, when we work with government, we know it will take another 10 years to get a legislative action going. And we don't have time years. In 10 years' time, we're going to have double the amount of plastic in the ocean. So obviously, that's something that we need to work parallel to. But the private sector have to be there changing the thing and already changing the practice tomorrow. So this is when we talk about partnerships. And once again, we talked about the Agenda 2030, the 17 goals. The ocean goal is 14. There is another goal, which is really important, and that's number 17, which talk about public-private partnership. But what is that? And public-private partnership, I think the combination and the work that we had with the Volvo Ocean Race, and for all the companies out there that has joined this race so far, is just showcasing what a fantastic partnership could actually lead to. We are not controlling what we do. We're just putting out emotions and awareness, which is also a foundation of any democracy, for anyone to taking part of this, but also having a little bit ownership, getting credibility for what we have done. Nobody wants to work for someone else taking the claim. So we want everybody to be out there taking really the proud of what you have done. And I think this has all been enabled by the Volvo Ocean Race during the last course. And I think for the last point, it has been a collective effort by private sector, government, NGOs, philanthropists, and all you guys sitting here, business leader, Her Royal Highness, ministers and ambassadors. And I think we also have all a collective responsibility. How do we take this forwards, but also upwards? And I think also the next race, whatever happens to that, is just showcase what a tremendous opportunity and the goodwill, because in the end, we all want to be part of the solution and having an added value to whatever we want to do and to whatever we want to work with. That was sort of my little story of this sort of this day, half day. And I think there is a much more details that we need to follow up on a very individual basis. But Mia, back to you to do the final wrap up.
Thank you very much, Lisa.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you very much. Now, in just a minute's time, it's time for what is called a casual lunch, right behind you. Could I just the speakers to come up on stage? It's photo session for the speakers. And could I just ask all of you to sign the Clean Seas Pledge? We have hostesses going or walking around the room with iPads, so you just sign the Clean Seas Pledge. And thank you very much for all your collaboration and cooperation, and thank you for a wonderful day.